All right, I will say hello and welcome back to another episode of All About Balance. And today I am joined by physio extraordinaire and the man with some very big news and a whiskey in his hand, Mr. Tom Walker. How's it going, my friend?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So please break the news. What have you got to
Yeah,
tell us?
so I'll be handing my notice in at the NHS this week. So it's long overdue, but I think after the spell of COVID and staff and how we've been gone through that process as staff has been quite challenging. So I'm really looking forward to having a bit more time with people and clients, because in the NHS that doesn't always happen as much as I'd like it to.
Yeah, so I think
So
that's probably the first place to start, right? Yeah, congratulations. First of all, congratulations. I'll raise you my water. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, right, you were, I guess, an
hmm
NHS physiotherapist, right, and you're now
hmm
moving to be a private
Yeah,
physiotherapist. So do you
yeah,
want to talk a little bit about that and how that
yeah.
all began?
So my kind of background, and I'm sure we'll visit it at some point, is I initially did a sports science degree. After I was competing professionally in skeleton bobsleigh at the time, and then when I finished that, I started to do a sports massage qualification, and then fortunately I'm supported by a very, very good wife, and towards the end of my sports massage qualification, I was looking at just going into physiotherapy, and she kind of raised a really good point, which was what's 3 years in 30 years time. And so that kind of got me going and gave me a bit of a kick up the backside. So yeah, I got into physiotherapy, but it's always been a passion of mine. Whether or not I've been involved to some degree in professional sport or when I've gone through rehab, it's always kind of been my focus. And I think you look at professionals or you look at people who are really good at what they do, and they have this passion, and when people try and emulate that passion, they often fall flat because it's not their passion. But for me, it's kind of what I live and breathe, and I end up reading articles when I'm sat on the sofa, or when I'm at work at lunchtime, I'm reading more articles. So it's kind of what's driven me to be interested in what I do. But physiotherapy is quite a complex world, and there's quite a lot of information out there, and it's kind of one of the reasons I started a physio page, in essence, on Instagram, because I think there's a lot of information out there that can be confusing and challenging for people. So
So I
this is
think
where
probably
I am.
the first place to start is what is physiotherapy? Because
Okay.
I think we hear that term a
Yeah.
lot, right?
Yeah. So physiotherapy, in essence, and Americans will kind of break it up into physical therapy, is using physical interventions, exercise, hands-on therapy, different treatments, modalities to kind of bring favorable therapeutic outcomes for people. So the thing is, with physiotherapy, you may have a tradition, like a knowledge of what traditional physiotherapy is, being I have a bad joint, muscle, etc., and I go and see a physiotherapist. But there are three realms of physiotherapy. There's musculoskeletal, which is probably what most of us know it as, neurological, so considering like stroke rehab, um, neurodevelopmental issues, like I worked with children doing that, and then respiratory. So anytime you go onto a respiratory ward, physiotherapists will be there doing chest clearance techniques, suctioning people, those sorts of things. So it's quite a medical role in certain specialties.
And that's obviously something that's been drastically needed recently, right? The
Yeah,
respiratory side, anyway.
yeah, definitely. I mean, currently I'm working as in the NHS. I work as a respiratory therapist, and
Okay.
I'm based on intensive care at the moment. So we've still got some of the kind of aftermath of COVID, but it's definitely not as it was.
Well, I think that's probably another place I think we should go into. Like,
hmm
what is the situation now for somebody with boots on the ground?
Um, so definitely on the down. So we obviously had our peak in sort of we shut down in March, and then we started to have a bit of a peak for subsequent weeks, and then a bit of a decline. Um, COVID's a really interesting subject for me because I kind of sit somewhere in the middle. Um, Obviously, having worked in acute respiratory settings, I've seen the impact of it probably more so than most. But on the other side of it as well, I can kind of understand people's frustrations or disregard for certain rules and procedures that are being put in place. But from my experience as as a respiratory therapist, I've seen some pretty nasty situations, and then I was also at the peak of the first wave, and we can maybe talk about whether or not we think there'll be a second one. But I was also redeployed to nursing homes and care homes,
Okay.
and that's certainly an area that wasn't discussed as well as it should have been.
Yeah, I mean, let's do that now.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be a second wave? What do you think?
I'm back and forwards. So I think if you look at the figures at the moment, we're steadily on the incline. But to be considerate, we've eased a lot of measures, and let's be pragmatic. That most people, probably don't take the measures very seriously at the moment anyway. They've kind of disregarded those. So considering how many people are disregarding the current measures or have never, and considering we open pubs, we open gyms, we open those sorts of things, there's not been as much of an increase as I anticipated. I think that the real question lies in additional winter pressures. So when flu season becomes involved and all those other things that come involved, people spend more time inside, people become less active. That kind of impacts on the capacity of the NHS. So I'm on the fence, but I think we're better prepared for a second wave than we were for the first.
So I equally don't know whether there will be a second wave. I'm not sure I necessarily agree that we're better prepared. I think you saying we're better prepared is potentially from a medical perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I don't think from a psychological perspective or necessarily from a logistical perspective we're better prepared. Or an economic perspective for that matter. I think, I live in Southeast London, and I know you live a little bit further up north than that, little bit, but
just a tiny bit.
Yeah, just a tiny bit. But there are lots of small businesses just in the district I live in Woolwich that don't exist anymore. There's obviously this help out by eating out scheme that's coming now, and I think that's good, but that definitely shows you that there is a drastic problem with that industry. And I think that for a lot of people, especially in London, who are used to being out and doing things, whether it's recreational or work, like to me there are like three types of people in London. One of them is people that have all of the money and all they do is play, right? Or a lot of what they do is play.
Yeah.
The one is that they either have a little bit of money or not a lot of money and all they do is work.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one is the homeless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're used to being outside all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All of those people, very few of them are used to being inside a set of four walls for an extended period of time. And the majority of them either without the ability to work or working, but in different conditions, right? And I think that the psychological effect of that is going to be compounded by a lot of other factors. Like, for instance, the domestic violence rates have risen. The domestic abuse to children has risen. The suicide rate has exponentially risen. The starvation has risen, etc., etc., etc. What we're going to see out of this is the unemployment rate is going to stay at a certain level. There's going to be, food banks. The necessity of food banks is going to rise. Like the psychological and economic and social effects of the second wave, if it comes, is going to be way more drastic, and I think that than we expect. I think.
So I would add a caveat in terms of what I said about being prepared. I think from a medical perspective, more so. So in terms of what we have access to, capacity planning for services, particularly ventilators, and acute services are good. But so this is an interesting point when we talk about the economic impact. So I'm fortunate. I'm very privileged having worked for the NHS. It's probably one of the only places when having a public sector wage has been secure. But I agree with you. So loneliness is also a big thing, because it's okay for people to say, well, we should just shelter the elderly and vulnerable. But loneliness is huge. That contributes to suicide. That contributes to mental health issues, alcohol problems. And, an interesting thing is, if I said to someone, if you look at a typical patient on ICU, what would you expect? They'd probably say car crashes. They'd probably say, you know, major events. But what we see a lot of are overdoses and attempted suicide. And that's largely, and interestingly enough, probably my view when I started as a physio was I was quite dogmatic, being that, well, you know, addiction's addiction. I had quite a narrow mindset. But when you see someone who's consumed 150 units of alcohol a week and then decides to go cold turkey because they kind of know it's not good for them and it makes them ill, I think that's kind of a big issue there. So we need to be more considerate, definitely from the mental health perspective. That's for sure.
I agree, and I think that, you know, whilst you are right that hospitals, I'm sure, and this is something that's actually been incredibly positive about this whole thing, is that you've seen essentially a global intelligence arise and combine to one problem, really. And I think it's, and one of the vastly beautiful things about the world is that lots of intelligent people are working on lots of different problems, right? And I think that that's great, and we get lots of cool things that come out of that. But in the same vein, we've now seen essentially the sectors of various scientists and medical professionals and economists and technicians and, you know, mathematicians and all of this, technologists and all these sorts of people have come together to try and devise a plan to try and fix this problem, right? And I think that, you know, people have said, and I don't know anything about medicine really, is, you know, a vaccine generally takes 15 years and we're looking at getting one in 18 months.
Yes,
that's
I think
insane.
I've kind of thrown that view out personally. I think there's probably other ways and other interventions we can consider before that. I think relying on that is probably a bit naive.
Sure, but I think the reason why I raised the vaccine number, like, let's not get into a debate about pro or anti-vaccine, right? Because we could be here all fucking day, and frankly, I'm not educated enough to have that. But I think that, you know, what we do have is we have proof that human evolution, essentially, or creation from humanity, can be done extremely rapidly and can be done in conjunction with each other, and it can be done when there's a worthy cause, right? Worthy, quote unquote, whatever. And I think that is something that's extremely positive to come out of this.
And definitely, and I think there's aspects of it that have kind of given me some hope for humanity, as it were. You know, I've seen
hope's a fucking dangerous word, my friend.
And so there are when we presented with a situation like this, look, I will be the first to criticize when it comes down to personal protective equipment, and I'll definitely criticize the way that staff have been treated and the way that the NHS has been treated. But there are moments I've seen where people have kind of bonded together and tried, but then those moments are quite few and far between, because now it can also become quite divisive. You know, if you go onto Instagram, you'll have people with strong views either side, and I think a bit of nuance and understanding, and, you know, so interestingly enough, I had a client the other week who kind of said to me, I think it's all made up. I think it's a bit of a government hoax. And I mentioned it at the work today, and they all went like, woo, like flew off the handle at it. And I think you need to understand someone's point of view. You know, what experiences have they had? What have they kind of observed? Because they're quite different to mine. And, you know, my question was, well, why do you think it's conspiracy? You know, what's to be gained from it? And when we had a bit of a conversation, surprise, surprise, you can see their perspective. But I think it comes down to having those open discussions, because if we sit on one side of the fence and throw mud, it's not productive. It doesn't really get anywhere.
Yeah, and I think that that's such a difficult stance to take, because, you know, from a primal perspective, from a very root biological perspective, we are one or the other, really.
Yeah.
Like, we are tribes people at the very end, and throwing mud is essentially what monkeys are great at, right? And that's exactly what we are, essentially. And it's very, very difficult.
If you'd have asked me that 10 years ago, I'd have probably had a different perspective.
Like, those things are so hard not to do. But I agree. I mean, the philosophical position I take in most arguments, or try to take in most arguments, is that the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. You
Yeah.
know, I follow people on Instagram that are equally, super anti-vaccine, and they're saying that the idea that the government is mandating you to wear a mask is taking away your liberties and your free rights, and what you're going to do, make me wear a mask? Like, try me, see what happens, and this kind of vitriol, and that's fine. Like, if that's your opinion, that's fine. I disagree with that position.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's trying to understand that perspective, isn't it? And then their epistemology, really.
Absolutely, and then on the other side, there's people that take it even the other way, and there's people that won't leave their house, and they won't hug their own mothers that have been in the same house for the last 4 months, and they haven't left either. The idea that social distancing has to be kept even with the people inside your house, and all this sort of stuff. And again, I don't agree with that either, but that's not my choice. And your point is valid, because on the topic of conspiracy, the problem with conspiracy theories is that some of them are real.
Yeah.
And when some of them are real, that adds fuel to the fire of those that are potentially not real, and those that are just absolutely not real, right? Because sorry, go on.
Yeah, and it's quite easy to make a joke about Eddie Bravo, isn't it? At this point, I think they'd insert an Eddie Bravo joke. Look into it. Yeah, so I mean, the conspiracy theories are quite interesting, and this is another balanced position I quite like to play, is when, particularly in my work in the public sector, you have quite a strong sort of left-leaning workforce, and so it's easy to take pot shots at Trump. It's easy to say, oh, Donald Trump said this. But occasionally, now and again, I'll just throw in a statement. Well, actually, have you read any of the Podesta emails? Have you seen some of the information that Hillary Clinton brought across? I said, I'm neither pro-Trump nor pro-Hillary, but neither's kind of a shining knight, and kind of went into some of the details behind that and the information that the government shared and some of the stuff from Julian Assange. And when you go into those details, it's quite hard for people to reconcile themselves, and they go, oh, hang on, but I have to take like a really binary position. But I think, I don't know, there are certain conspiracy theories where I think it'll come back to, I'm a big fan of epistemology. Have you ever come across something called street epistemology?
No.
Okay, so there's a man on the internet called Anthony Magnabosco. He does a series called Street Epistemology. So he'll stop someone on the street and say to them, do you have a worldview that's considered to be particularly unusual or different? And you hold that worldview quite strongly. And obviously things like karma, God, ghosts will come up. And then he'll basically say, how to a percentage, how strong do you hold that position? And if they say 100%, he's like, that's quite strong. What contributes to those beliefs? And then he'll say, hypothetically, if one of those things were to be shown to be fallacious, would that change your confidence in that belief? And so it's quite non-confrontational. And actually what he does is, through a process of self-reflection, allows people to pick apart their views and beliefs. And I think that's kind of the way to do it, to have these conversations, because it's quite easy to become confrontational, isn't it?
Of course, yeah, of course. And I think, to your point about a Podesta email, or this from Hillary or that from Hillary, the real problem there too is that you don't know how much of that is real also, because we're in a world now where
absolutely.
It's so easy to fake everything. It's so easy to doctor something. It's so easy to change or misinterpret information given in a certain light or context, that it's so difficult to really have. And this is one of the reasons why I try not to hold too many blunt binary positions, is that essentially, like, and this isn't a conspiratory kind of theory, is that you've got fucking no idea what's real, frankly. Like, you don't. So it kind of is what it is.
And to what I mean, have you heard of kind of hard solipsism? So basically, there's a concept in philosophy, i.e., that you and I share an existence, and we know that we share an existence because we experience similar things, we live in the same world, and we interact with each other in that world. However, there is no, we could potentially be a brain in a vat, experiencing these things and having them. It's essentially the principle the Matrix touched on, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the only kind of thing we can base off is kind of shared experiences and kind of things that are internally consistent. But the internet, we don't know who wrote the articles, those sources, and so I can totally be quite sympathetic for people who, I don't particularly hold the view of flat Earth, but if someone holds the view of flat Earth, I'll happily have that discussion, because it's important to understand where people are coming from rather than just mocking them for it.
I agree, and it's so difficult because we are, as I touched on earlier, we are so divisive in our nature, right? Whether it's a football team or whether it's a determination of a certain physio definition, right? Even down to a definition or approach or a methodology or whatever.
Yeah, it's huge in physiotherapy. There's a massive divide in certain ideas and views, and it's not productive particularly.
And how do you sort of bridge that gap? Because obviously you must be, and you must have certain opinions, otherwise you would never practice anything, right?
Yeah, well, the whole point is, a classic conversation is, I did this therapy the other day, and someone say there's not a lot of evidence for that. And kind of my rebuttal sometimes, if it's me being a bit facetious, I'm like, there's not a lot of evidence for anything. And so, at what point we can look at academic evidence, and I'm a big academic. I will read a lot of papers, but I'm only as good as the last few papers I've read. And where I've exposed myself to certain ideas and concepts, I then decide, are these clinically effective? And do these treatments bring people value? Do they walk out there feeling like they've got a therapeutic effect? And so the big divide in physiotherapy a lot of the time is manual therapy. A lot of people say it doesn't work, but then on the other side of it, there'll be like patient education. Like, we empower people, we help people to take control of their lives, and give them permission to do so. But my philosophy really on it all is do what works, and if both work, do both, and you can sometimes have a better effect. And it's also about matching people's perceptions of therapy, because how many people do you know who've gone to see an NHS physiotherapist, said I got talked at for 20 minutes and they gave me a sheet with 3 exercises on it? It's not particularly effective therapy.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that we'll just touch on quickly is when you say manual therapy, what do you mean?
So hands-on kind of techniques, massage, they might use acupuncture, various forms. You might have seen like Graston technique, where people use those metal tools, plates, cupping, those sorts of things. So that would be typically your hands-on touching people therapy, making them kind of feel better. And that's quite a divisive topic at the moment.
And where do you sit on that? What do you think it works? Do you think it doesn't work? What do you?
Can talk about the evidence, and then I can probably talk about anecdotally. So a lot of the evidence shows that sometimes it's not higher than placebo, sometimes it is. There's hundreds of papers have been done on it, but the issue we have when we come to evaluating these things is, how do we demonstrate what is placebo as well? Because to identify placebo, you need to demonstrate placebo. Just because something's having, so I'll give you an example. Massage, you can give someone a massage and they'll say they feel better, right? And so the studies kind of say, if you give someone a massage, they'll walk away, they feel better. We don't know the mechanism for it, but it's probably placebo. That's not good enough. For me, as a manual therapist and a physiotherapist, because I do a bit of both, if I give someone a massage and they feel better, I'm not going to say I'm breaking up adhesions, because the evidence doesn't really show that. I'm not going to say I'm, realigning certain tissues, because the evidence doesn't show that. But what I do know is when I do that, they have a therapeutic effect. And if I can do that enough and it modulates their pain and they feel a bit better and it encourages them to move, and then they go and do the exercises I gave them to do, it's a win-win. But the challenge there is if you stray away from it, patients have perceptions of what physiotherapy is. And so if they go into an appointment and have a perception that they'll get a massage and they walk out of that appointment without a massage, they'll deem it to be an ineffective therapy.
Yeah, that's huge, right?
Yeah,
That is
massive.
huge, and I think, in the same vein, placebo is actually vastly important to a healing process. If somebody
Definitely.
feels like they're going to get better, then they're probably going to get better a little bit, right? Or they're going to push themselves to get better.
Yeah, and I mean, let's take an example, right? So back pain. I did a little poll on my Instagram story. Yeah, every 80% plus, right? And of my small sample size, like 90 plus, but generally 80% of people report lower back pain. Most lower back pain will self-resolve in 6 weeks. A lot don't, so a lot come to see me. That guy, yeah, you. And so if you take on an old school approach where you have back pain and you stop doing activities that aggravate it, then you become deconditioned. And when you become deconditioned, then you continue to not do activities. And then when you get back to activities, surprise, surprise, it gets worse because you've become deconditioned to the activities. So it's about, I don't really do much as a therapist. I can modulate pain a bit, but it's about kind of educating people and getting them to a point where we can build up their tolerance to activity. If it gets a bit much, we can calm it down and just gradually expose them to become more robust, rather than just kind of saying, oh, you're frail, don't worry about it, step away, never do BJJ again, you know what I mean? Never do judo again. And it's not what we're about. It shouldn't be what we're about.
Yeah, and I think that that's important as well. And I think there's that, to me, like the exposing somebody to the ability to get better
Yeah.
is is a really, really nice definition for what you do, I think. Because there seems to be, as with everything, there seems to be this bit of fluff, this placebo fluff that we talk about, right? Whether that is the modulation of pain through a massage. Now, as you say, the idea of breaking down the adhesions in tissue, or cleansing the body of toxins in the tissue, maybe there's
Yeah.
not the evidence to support that.
Yeah.
But as we've already touched on, if somebody holds an opinion that's extreme in one form, and if they go into a room expecting a massage to clear the toxins in their back, they take that massage or the acupuncture or the cupping or whatever it is you're doing, and they feel like that's happened. The likelihood is, when you then say to them, okay, what I'd like you to do is body weight squats for the next 3 days, whatever.
Yeah.
And they do that, as you say, you're exposing them to what you actually want to expose them to, which is
Yeah.
the expression of their selves, the expression of what you determine to be the remedy. But you're also giving them the endorphins, right, the serotonin that they need to actually do the thing, right? Because I don't know whether you hear this. I imagine you hear this a lot. But if you say to somebody, okay, the fix for back pain is being able to squat your body weight, let's just say. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
If I was to go and put my body weight on a bar, I can almost guarantee you I couldn't do it for 1 rep.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee it. And the understanding of the effort that it would take to work to the point where it's a body weight squat is almost certainly larger than the actual work itself. But the effort that I think it's going to take puts you off the thing itself, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that, as you're saying, a gradual exposure to the remedy of whatever it is, and whether you're coupling that with something that is or isn't placebo,
Yep.
is going to be huge for somebody's adaptation and adoption of that thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a few types of clients though, and
Oh, sure, yeah, sure.
no, I'm not disagreeing. I think you're definitely in the right realms there, and I think, but you have a certain types of clients. You have the ones who are probably like me, who was an ex-athlete, who's just like, just train, just keep training, which isn't particularly helpful, and it's about having a conversation about managing workloads. Then you have other people who are so fearful of stepping in that they've got permanent damage, that, there's a big thing about language that we use, and physios need to get better at it. Is, I don't know about your experiences, Ari, but I've been to see some really good physios and not so great ones, and the not so great ones they've almost like applauded or pointed out my weaknesses or my frailties. Oh, your back's really bad, mate. Your posture's really bad, all this sort of stuff. And you never walk out of there feeling empowered. You feel broken. And I think it's those are the people I'm more interested in. Your athletes, you can calm down a bit, but they'll go and try and like back squat 3 times their body weight and will continue to do so. You just need to manage it and they'll keep coming back to you. So, but with those clients who are fearful of exercise, that's kind of where I really get a big kick out of my job, when they can see actually my level of function on a day-to-day basis lives within this box. And the box I'm talking about is everyday activity, so shopping, cleaning. And if you ask them to go for a jog, they step outside of that box. And so if you can say, instead of, fitting all of these activities into your box, let's make your box bigger. Let's make your capacity to work stronger and better. And then suddenly they're like, whoa, my life's worth living. I can go and do these things. I can go do activities I never thought I could do. And that is the best part of my job. And that is why I love my job so much.
Yeah. And I don't mean to stray too quickly away.
No, go for it.
But I do want to talk a little bit about you being a professional athlete and how essentially you're your own case study, right? And you are one of
certainly.
your own type of clients.
Yeah.
But in terms of my experience of physio, equally, I have been to some physios that talked exactly like you've mentioned, and I've also been to some really good ones. One of the really good ones was Combat Sports Clinic. Rosie Sexton, you know Rosie Sexton?
I don't know Rosie. No.
Rosie Sexton is one of the most incredibly academic people. She's got about 15 degrees at this point, right?
Yeah, she just throws them out. Yeah,
she does. Yeah, she just throws them out. She's also an MMA pioneer for the UK.
Okay, I don't know anything about Rosie, so I'm going to have to go get Instagramming after this.
Yeah, fought on Cage Warriors for a long, long time. Fought Ioane and Jacek for the Cage Warriors title.
Oh, really?
Pretty sure she fought in the UFC as well. Jiu-Jitsu black belt, like just a phenomenal woman. And I actually, her clinic is in Solihull in Birmingham. And even though I wasn't able to actually go there, we had like a 90-minute Skype chat or whatever it was, and she was incredible. Like she was great. Like, she demonstrated stuff for me, and she gave me a plan and all that stuff, and it was grand. Like it was really, really, really good. A really good experience. So
good.
Shout out to Rosie Sexton. But yeah, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about you being a professional athlete. Like I'm nowhere near a professional athlete. Not in any way, shape, or form. But how was that? Like, how was being a professional athlete?
So I kind of walk you through the process. I got involved with skeleton. People say skeleton bobsleigh.
Fucking crazy choice.
It's mad. It is mad. So I kind of was always very athletic. I'm pretty good at the 100 meters. Not at the point where I could have been elite. So I used to run 100 meters, and my best was 10:82. So I was pretty quick, but not elite, right? So you're looking kind of your 10.3s, the people are going to break through to the elite levels.
Yeah.
And so when I was doing my first degree, there's something came through called Power to Podium, which was where UK Sport used certain anthropometric measures and had some consistent data that if you could run at certain speeds and jump at certain speeds, you'd be great at pushing a sled, and then they could teach you how to drive a sled. So I think probably 2,000 people signed up for it, and then they eventually kind of whittled it down to 6 of us, and then they took 10 of us out on ice to Lillehammer in Norway, and then they cut 4 after that, and then left 6 there. So yeah, I kind of got into it that way. So I had never ever been on a sled till I was like 21. And then that was the first time down was certainly an experience. But the second was worse because I knew what was coming.
Yeah.
But awesome. Like when you get it right, incredible sport. But when you get it wrong, it is dire.
I mean, you sent me a couple of photos of your side, and it looks like you've painted a wall purple.
Yeah, you're not kidding. So the thing is, a lot of people have probably seen skeleton in the Olympics, right? Where you run fast, lay down and go on the sled. But the demands of the sport are really high. So my sled was, when I was competing, I was probably around 71 kilos at my heaviest, and about 68 at my lightest, and that would fluctuate through the season. And my sled weighed 43 kilos.
Jesus Christ.
And so it's not a light thing. You've got to get it moving quick. And then so your push is important. So you have to be incredibly athletic.
Power.
Mate, when I was at my best, I've squatted triple my body weight.
Nice.
And so could easily leg press 600 kilos. Like I was really, really quite strong. Back was ruined. Let's just be really honest here. But the thing is as well, it's the demands on your neck, because in certain corners you'll pull 5-6G.
Oof.
You'll have some corners though where there's one in Altenburg. Oh, Sue's talking to me. There's one track in Altenburg, which is in Germany. It was built by the behind the wall Germans, where they basically pieced together all the nastiest corners they could from other tracks, and it was actually a no-fly zone, oddly enough. So that corner, there was one corner in there where if you went into it late, you'd pull a snap G of about 40 Gs. So you'd have to, if you were late into the corner, you'd put your head on the ice so you wouldn't get that sort of whiplash effect. But yeah, that was some big neck problems there. So mad sport. I look back to it and I just think, what on earth was I thinking? But great at the same time. So there was actually a few stories of athletes who, I can't remember if it's corner. This is how bad I'm forgetting. I think it's corner 15. When you come in and some would just bounce. So certain people have knocked themselves out on that corner. So it's
fuck.
Mate, honestly, I remember there was the problem you've got is when you start your run, you get to the top of the track and the person goes before you. When they've crossed the line, you'll hear so-and-so has crossed the line, track is clear for Tom. You've got 30 seconds to get ready before you cross the first timing gate. And so you'd be stood at the top of the track with your helmet you've got like your full winter kit on. And I had do you remember those Adidas poppers where you pull them off? I used to have those because they were easy to get off. And I'd unzip my jacket, put my helmet on, and then you're like, shit, here we go. But if you didn't put a hairdryer in your helmet before, your visor could sometimes frost up. And I remember, I think it was Lake Placid in New York, it was minus 23 degrees Celsius. And I started pushing my sled, and I got on my sled, and by the end of the first corner, I'm like, I can't see anything.
Oh, Jesus.
Completely frosted over. I was like, right, I'm just going to have to go and feel, man, and just see how we go. And I did okay. It wasn't a record-breaking time, but it was interesting how much I realized I outsourced some of my senses. So it wasn't really vision I used, and you can't really see much because your head's so low. It's a lot of sort of proprioception. But it's interesting and I think it's interesting for any athlete, any high-level athlete, is how fast they process information. So there's a corner in Lillehammer where you've seen Cool Runnings, right?
Of course.
Who hasn't? I got bought 3 copies of that when I made the British team from different people, and oh yeah, thanks, mate.
Yeah.
But when you look at a sled going in a corner, right, you'll see it come up and down. So there's sorts of oscillations, and the objective really is to extend or shorten those oscillations to get the ideal exit. And so certain oscillations I'd want when I come up to the peak, that's when your G-force is the highest.
Yeah.
Then you kind of lift your shoulder up to extend that peak to give you a better exit. And this corner 13 in Lillehammer, I probably did, 10 to 12 steers in the corner. But the thing that stuck out to me was when I watched someone else do it and shoot around the corner, it was just like that. And I'm thinking, how the hell am I doing that many steers? And I think it's because you just become so accustomed to feel, and your brain is just running on a certain level of autonomic function that you just can't process the information that quickly. And so any high level athlete, when I watch them at the top of the game, you know they're processing like that.
Well, I think the greatest example of that is Lionel Messi.
Yeah.
So, a lot of sports discussion is Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi the greatest athlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
The greatest athlete, to me, it has to be Cristiano Ronaldo, right? And the reason it has to be Cristiano Ronaldo is because he can run faster, he can jump higher, he has a longer stride, he has a more powerful strike. That's athletic to me, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But the better footballer, oh my God, they're not even on the same planet. The process power that Lionel Messi has, he's like a supercomputer, right?
Yeah, for sure.
you watch that guy, he's watching the game in 17D and everyone else is watching it in 2D.
Yeah.
Like, the way that he can process a certain play and how he can anticipate other players' movements before it even happens, and how he can anticipate the synergy of where his own teammates should be, and he'll play a ball that nobody else on the pitch will see, or if they do see it, it's too late because he's already played it.
Yeah.
Is just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And when you get to that high level, so there was one athlete when we did skeleton called Martin Stukers, who was a Latvian, and he is like way ahead. Like there's literally no point trying to compete with him. So unfortunately, he never won an Olympic gold medal, and this is the dirty part of the sport: is if you held the games at your home, if you had a home track, so if you were Canada or Russia in the cases of the games he went to, if you could run the track as many times as you wanted if you were from that nation. So Martin's obviously always walked away with silver, and then in 2014 he walked away with silver, but the athlete who won, a Russian, was tested positive and didn't retrospectively get his medal taken away from him. So Martin's is essence the best athlete I've ever seen. He would win. Basically in skeleton you do 2 runs, and it's a summation of the times of both of those runs that would win. We would be like teetering races. If you had a good win, it was by like 1/10 of a second. Martin's would be winning by 2 seconds. Like, he was that good. His ability to process information and the way that his approach, like he lived and breathed the sport. And as someone who was competing in that field, you're competing within your field, and then there's Martin's. And that's awesome. I love seeing someone who's that good at something.
I mean, just to be a real stickler and ruin this entire conversation, I'm gonna pull a quote from a master philosopher, and that's Nathan Diaz. Everyone's on fucking steroids, right? Everyone's on steroids.
Yeah, man. Right.
But yeah, I mean, like, so, I agree. Go on, let's go.
I can tell you a funny story about steroids because the Russians are obviously riddled with it. And have you seen, what was it, Icarus?
Yes.
Around 2014 was one of the years I was competing. It was the Olympic season on 2014, and Alexander Trechkov, who was the gold medalist that year, was at one of the events in Calgary, and we're all like warming up. We're outside doing our sprints, and Alexander Trechkov had the best start in the world. He was probably pushing 2/10 faster than everyone else. It was mad.
Jesus Christ. It's a powerful fucker.
Well, he was really long, lanky, had good range of movement. He kind of like the ideal body type. But yeah, he never warmed up, just did a few little shoulder shrugs, and then boom, 2/10 faster than you all. And surprise, surprise, he was testing positive. But that's another interesting discussion to have about performance enhancing drugs, because you know what, I don't agree with Nate on a lot of things, but I might I'm close to agreeing with him on that one.
Yeah, and I think, just to kind of drag it back slightly, like, I think that if you look at sport in general, there is always the person that is the best, the outlying best.
Yeah, for sure.
Football, Lionel Messi. Boxing, I mean, at one point it was Muhammad Ali, then it was Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, in the heavyweight division now, maybe it's Tyson Fury. I don't really know. I guess as a proper boxer, it's probably Tyson Fury. But we'll find out in a couple of fights when he rematches Deontay and then he fights Anthony. But in MMA, for instance, it was John Jones for the longest time, right?
Yeah,
John
for
Jones
sure.
or Demetrius Johnson. In JiuJitsu, it was Roger Gracie for ages. Then it was Marcelo, and then then it was, or now it's Gordon, right? I guess in Nogi Jiu-Jitsu especially.
Yeah.
And you watch them, and they're competing with idols of the sport, and they're just making it look like they're competing against me. Right? It doesn't matter who you put in front of you. And I think that's synonymous to life. And I think that if you've been anywhere near a high level, like I've not really been anywhere near a high level in any sport. Like I competed in kickboxing for a little while, but was never really any good. And obviously I've competed in jiu-jitsu now, and equally I'm not very good either. But
no, me neither.
But you know, you've competed at a high level and you've seen these athletes, and I think that it's really humbling to be in a position where you are one of the elites, essentially, right? GB team, you're essentially one of the elites in your sport, and then you're like, oh yeah, it's cool, but there's this hierarchy, and that dude's at the top.
Yeah, and you know, for me, I think there was a point where I was looking around and I'm going, you know what, you've got to be introspective. And I said, you know, I don't think I've got what it takes. Like, I think I didn't love. It was, look, there's the ego part of it, right? There's your identity where you think, well, I'm a GB athlete. And realistically, you know, no one actually, I go to a job interview, no one really cares. Like, it's quite cool to chat about, but it doesn't mean, you know, and I think it was a big part of my identity, and that's probably why I held on to it. But I didn't love it and breathe it, and it wasn't my passion. I was good at it, but I was never going to be the best at it. And so when you're investing your time and energy into trying to become a world champion and you're not sold on it, you've got to walk away. And so that's, you know, I enjoy BJJ much more than I ever enjoyed skeleton. I enjoy like physio, man. Physio is my passion. My job is so like, it is so good to be able to come back from your job and be like, I love my job. And that's a real honor to be able to have that.
For sure. And just as a small caveat before we move on, like, mate, you can be completely sold on a sport and still not be the greatest.
Yeah. You can love it though.
Yeah, you can love it and you can breathe it and live it, and there'll still be somebody better than you. Like John Jones is an amazing example of that. Like Gordon Ryan, maybe not because he does live and breathe it. Like John Jones will be out partying, doing drugs, hitting pregnant women, whatever. Still the best in the fucking world, bro. He'd turn up on any day and he would smash the shit out of dudes.
Yeah. It's mad.
You know, the greatest is Daniel Cormier, right? Daniel Cormier, you know, he was saying, oh, you know, you're a cokehead, you're this, you're that. And John's like, you're right. Still knocked you out though. It's like, what?
Yeah.
How does that even happen? Like,
and we always talk about it, but then if you put the mindset of Daniel Cormier inside the body of someone with that talent, then it's mega, isn't it?
But is it though?
Well, fair, because then you look at mindset, right? So Usain Bolt is a really good example of that.
Chicken nuggets before setting a world record.
Animal. But at the same time, you know, and that's a really interesting conversation to have, is performance anxiety, because you've heard about it. Yeah, well, you've interesting. One anecdote. I entered a judo competition in 2013, 14, I can't remember, maybe 15. And I've probably been doing judo for like 2 years. And I didn't realize I entered like a black belt competition and I was an orange belt. And so I was like, well, let's just go for it. Let's have a go. And first 3 matches, just like boom, ippon, like on my back, game over. And then the person who was coaching me, looked at me, he's like, Tom, what's your best throw? And I'm like, Ippon Seoinage. And I'm like, drop Seoinage, Tayatoshi. He's like, well, just do that. Why are you not doing it? Because I was so reactive, right? And I was going, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? And I just jumped in there and I was like, oh, Tayatoshi, boom, Ippon, I scored it. And I'm like, oh, all right, then this is the game we play. And it's that mindset that I think plays a massive part. That hesitancy can really impact your game.
So we won't talk about my first jiu-jitsu competition because it was an absolute fucking nightmare, and I've already talked about it a few times on the podcast. But like my second jiu-jitsu competition, I went in there, first 2 matches, I just smoked. Right, I was fine. I didn't submit anyone, but that's because both of them were tough, and I'm really shit at submitting people. So, but I was double points, like double digits in points, and I was fine. Then when before I stepped on the mat for the final in my division, my brain said, doesn't matter, you're going to get a medal. And it was then that I knew, like, I've fucked this. Like,
mate, been there.
And what happened? I got guillotined in like a minute. And I'm like...
And I think that I didn't compete my first competition in jiu-jitsu till August last year.
Right.
And so I went to the competition, but I had like a good mindset. So I got my blue belt in like the January of that year.
Congratulations.
And thank you very much. And I didn't expect it though. And I think that's probably like I had a bit of an imposter syndrome type thing.
I know the feeling.
So I rocked up and I'm like, well, if I get smashed, it's a lesson, and I realise I need to up my level. And so I was like, no, get out of your head. Like, you're better than this, Tom. You've competed at high levels in different sports. You're better than this. And so first comp, first match, just all over him, 50 seconds, Darce choke. And then I'm like, great, like, okay, this is it. And then my second one, like, there was a guy who absolutely smashed me when I went to visit into the gym, and I was up against him. And I'm like, no, this is it. Like, I'm after it. Like, he's going to get it. And then I got him with a straight ankle lock in like a minute and a half. And so I'm like, okay, right. And then I got to the final. I'm like, I'm going to get a medal. And I was like, shit, I've said it. And then, we had a good match. Like, I definitely had opportunities. I feel like, it is what it is. Those are the rules, and he won with the rules. And that's that's the game we play. But I was definitely after it, but I could have done more. I could have attempted more. And I think it is that sort of like hungry mindset. If you're getting after it and you're so confident in your abilities, then you succeed. But yeah, it's just the nature of the game. But it's really funny you mentioned that, because we have a few guys at our gym who started competing, and just said to them, like, just choose your game and enforce your will, and then they'll just have to react to it. And if they're reacting to it, they're not thinking about their game.
Yeah, like there's an interesting saying that Ashley Williams talks about, and I don't want to derail this into a jiu-jitsu podcast, but
No.
This is the final thing I'll say, is that I don't agree with his statement, but I will say it just because I think it's important here. Is like, he's like, I hate the comparison that jiu-jitsu is like chess, because in chess I take a turn and then you take a turn. He's like, when I play jiu-jitsu, it's always my turn. And like, that kind of supports your idea of pick your game and enforce it, and don't allow them, like, always make them reactionary. Now, in my opinion, like, jiu-jitsu has to be different, because unless you're competing against a Gordon Ryan or whatever, a lot of the time what you're seeing action and reaction, and the very nature is that you are taking turns. Whether you're taking turns behind the person or in front of the person, you're still taking turns. And in the same vein, like, a great example of that is Ross Nichols and JT Torres at ADCC, right? So Ross is a guard player, JT Torres is a guard passer, and JT couldn't pass Ross's guard, and Ross couldn't sweep JT, but both of them were like at their 100% peak, and they were both doing absolutely everything they could, but they were both just taking turns and making decisions that counteracted the other, and it was an absolutely phenomenal match. Phenomenal. Ross lost on points because he decided to sit to guard in the wrestling portion of the rule set. Fine, whatever. But my God, like, for high level decision making and high level turn taking, phenomenal match. But yeah, I mean, again, we can take that out to football or to
any sport,
to skeleton, to anything. Like, mindset and having a game plan and having a positive mindset is so critical.
So I had a teammate in skeleton who super confident, like, just unreal confidence, and to the point, like, I won't say his name, but I saw he'd written his own autobiography before he'd even started competing, because he's like, this is my story. And I'm like, man, this guy, like, believes it. And ultimately, like, he didn't achieve what he wanted to achieve, because I agree with you, your perceptions can only take you so far. Like, reality is the thing to deal with as well.
Whatever reality is.
Yeah, well, there we go. But yeah, and I think that is another thing to certainly consider is, ultimately, if I tried to enforce my game plan on Gordon Ryan, it probably wouldn't end the way I wanted it to end.
Jesus Christ, probably is like the kindest word you could have used in that sentence.
I'm being way too kind to myself here, but like,
I reckon
3 seconds.
I could enforce my will on Gordon Ryan if I had 2 hammers in my hand and he had his hands tied behind his
I'm
back.
not even that confident. Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah, like, it's tough. And what's crazy is, actually, like, when I was a kid and I was competing in kickboxing, mindset wasn't even a thing. I was literally just going in there to have a scrap, and it proved way more successful than my current jiu-jitsu career, and that speaks volumes, right? But I want to touch slightly on something that you said before we started recording the podcast, and that was, you mentioned that having a celebratory whiskey. Also, just a point, whiskey was clear. When is that a thing?
Oh, it's because I was having it's like a Japanese whiskey, and so.
All right, educated. I like it.
Yeah, so I remember of 3 years of drinking, I know it all. So basically in lockdown, loads of my friends got injured. So I gave loads of people physio advice. They didn't pay me and they sent me like alcohol. So I've got a whole cupboard full of a variety of whiskies and rums. So yeah, I thought I'd try that one out tonight.
And how is it? Critique it for us.
So I'm going to say something that's going to upset a lot of whiskey fans here.
All right.
I had it's a Japanese whiskey. I think it's called Hakutori. But I was reading on a kind of like a connoisseur's website that actually, if I have 50 mils and I double it up with 100 mils of water, they're like, oh, that's like, I know people are going to be like, that's disgusting, but it actually brings out a really good flavor. So for all of you whiskey lovers out there who are just DM me, throw insults that way, but I really enjoyed it.
Beautiful. I mean, I have never drank in my life. Not to do with religious reasons whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, so yeah, I'll let you take it away. Why you said to me off air that having a whiskey was an incredibly a big achievement in itself, right? And why is that?
So I was raised in a Mormon family, and I was a big believer in the religion till 20. I'm 31 now, and I left at 27.
So before you derail into this, can you explain briefly what Mormonism is and what the pillars of Mormonism is?
So Mormonism is essentially a religion that started in the 1830s in America, in New York, basically founded by a guy called Joseph Smith. The story that the Mormons would tell you is that Joseph Smith didn't know which religion was true. He lived in called the burned over district of New York, where there was a lot of religious revival. He prayed and asked God which religion was true. God and Jesus Christ appeared to him and told him that none of the religions were true and that he was going to be the prophet to restore Jesus Christ's original church. And then you've probably heard of the Book of Mormon, probably the musical more than the actual book. But the Book of Mormon was a book that Joseph claimed to find, which was an ancient record of the American Indians from about 600 BC to 400 AD. So it kind of went alongside the Bible, talking about Jesus Christ. So in essence, the church today has like a prophet and 12 apostles, and they believe that the church, like God and Jesus Christ, communicate to the prophet, who then disseminates that information to the members worldwide.
Okay, so yeah, so you were brought up Mormon, right?
Yep.
And what happened?
So yeah, like all in 100%. And I think it's really important to state that when we're talking about beliefs and views is I was well in. So I typically, when you grow up in the church, men are expected to go on missions. You know, you've probably heard of the musical where you wear the name badges, right?
So I've not.
Okay, so basically, from the ages of 19 to about 21, you go on a 2-year mission where you are assigned to a certain area around the world and knock doors and try and convert people.
Okay.
In proselyte, it's almost like a coming of age thing. So you don't see your family and friends for 2 years. I could call my family twice a year. I can only communicate through letters once a week. And so you're quite isolated, and you're with a mission companion the whole time. You can't separate from them apart from when you go to the toilet. So it's quite intense, and it's quite a structured regime. And of all the places in the world to go, I went to Birmingham.
Christ.
I know. Tell me about it.
You could have gone somewhere nice.
I know. What do you mean? So yeah, that was. So I did that till I was 21. Came back from my mission, and then got married at 26. My wife was a Mormon as well, and then we left it when I was 27. And then so that was a real sort of whiplash for me. That was a massive change in my views, because I was all in. You know, people like, oh, he's going to be a bishop, or he's going to lead the church, and I was all in, and now I'm not.
So, I mean, first of all, it doesn't surprise me that you were all in. One, because religion has a means to do this to people, right? It has a means to involve and include and seclude at the same time. But you know what I think. Well, I think we'll get onto my opinions of religion after. But
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
What forced you, or what took you away from the church?
It was a bit of a subtle process, really, and I think it has to be, doesn't it? So initially, after I just got married, I remember like my wife had read some things on the internet about the church,
Oh, this is interesting.
and so she'd read some things about, basically there's a narrative that the church prescribes, and so I'm genuinely, I could write a PhD on Mormon history. Like, I had to read
You
that
fucking
much.
should, mate.
Mate, it'd be interesting, I tell you. And so in the 1960s, the church realized there was a problem because there were so many kind of contradictory viewpoints and statements, because it's quite, it's 200 years old now. And so they created something called the Correlation Committee, where basically they would decide what information was doctrine and what needed to be discarded. And so she came across some information that was contradictory to probably what our views, but was backed by a lot of the previous teachings of the church. And she was really careful with me. My wife's much smarter than I, and I think she'd figured it out before. And then she's a maths graduate, she's a data analyst, like, she's very objective. And so she read a review of the Book of Mormon and how, like, frequency of plagiarized words. So did you ever use like Turnitin, or it's like this software, if you produce an academic piece, it runs it through the internet and highlights recurrent words. So if a 4-word recurrence happened, then it's a strong possibility of plagiarism. And the possibility, they ran the Book of Mormon through, correlated it with literature at the time. It was like 99%, like, it's big. And she's like, you could have given me all the emotive arguments in the world, but if you give me data, she's like, then I'm out. And so she shared that with me, and I was like, crap. You just have this feeling of like, maybe I am wrong. And it was the first time it ever hit me. And I remember in Mormonism, you taught that you're married to your spouse for time and all eternity. And so I had a moment where I was like, oh, I'm not going to be married to her forever. And so it kicked off for the first time in my life a really significant anxiety attack. Like, I passed out on the floor, like I was hysterical, laughing, crying, like it was really odd. And probably after that, mate, it was just
sounds like you're baked.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. And so I came out of that, and I had 5 weeks off work.
Jesus.
Yeah, I was on taking beta blockers and everything. Like, I was really, really hit by it. And then I kind of came out of that and doubled down a bit, but it never really went out of my head. And then about a year later, I just decided, right, I'm gonna dig into this. Like, I need to know. And if it either strengthens my beliefs, it will. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And then I probably read, like, I was reading all night. Like, my wife would wake up and I'd just be on my phone. Like, I bought documents from like New York State sort of property records, and just to make sure I was absolutely certain. And then I remember being in the shower one day and I just said out loud, like, Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet. And I just like sobbed. It was just a really weird reaction, because you've got to, like, from someone who's always known that there was a God who was looking after me, and like all of these feelings I'd had, it was like a light switch just went off. And I'm like, right, what's my world? Like, what's reality now? Like, who am I?
Son.
Mate, it was unbelievable.
That's some heady shit. And I think the first thing that strikes me in this is, like, it's so incredible when you tell me that you have a super intelligent mathematician wife that is based entirely off facts, figures, and data.
Yeah.
That was also a devout Mormon.
So I'd say my wife less so than me. And the reason, she had a different experience to me growing up, being that she kind of, when people were like crying and like sharing their beliefs, she's like, what are they doing? I don't feel this. But when you're part of a community, she almost felt like a shame for not feeling like they felt. And so she would remain in the religion, but almost feel like she wasn't worthy to have those experiences in the religion, and other people were. And so it's almost like drags you along into it, and to say, having these experiences, do more. Whereas I was the opposite. Like, I was tears from the podium, like everything, just so odd. Like when I look back at myself, I think, wow. And this comes back to what we talk about, holding strong views. Is like, I believed it, and I'm not going to be quick to throw anyone under the bus for having a strong view, because I was there, man.
And I think as well, like given what you've said about the passion, the quite obvious passion you have for physiotherapy, right? Or what you must have put yourself through physically in order to get to the level that you got to in skeleton. Like, you're somebody that is probably, if you're in, you're in, and if you're out, you're not.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
And I think that those people, and I don't necessarily want to use the term naive as a negative thing, but
No.
people that are susceptible to being in or out, right? Like absolutists in a way, are people that, man, it's, you could have been sold on anything. Like you could have been sold on donuts, right? You'd be all in on donuts.
Yeah.
It just so happened that you were born into a family that were Mormon, and this probably comes somewhere from your parents, right? This mentality probably comes from somewhere from your parents, but the mentality that you were born into a religion that follows the same traits as most other religions, right?
With some added extras.
With some added extras, and I'm sure some taken away, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm sure there are some religions that do far more extreme stuff than what we're determined to be extreme than Mormons, and equally, like the whole thing about Mormonism is, they give 50% of their money to the church, or they do this or they do that, but all the thing you always hear is they're really nice people.
Yeah, totally. And so this is the interesting thing, is when you talk about, everyone goes to Mormons, like I never drank, never smoked, like tea or coffee was something we didn't have. Like gave 10% of my money to the church, like didn't have sex before I got married, all of these sorts of things. And like that's kind of quite common in a belief system. But what's really important to think is, I talk about Mormonism almost like it's like an open community. We don't live on a commune, but it's between the ages of 14 and 18, I was doing early morning like scripture classes with kids my age at 6 o'clock before I went to school, like all of these things. And your days in the week are occupied largely by church activities. So what, from an outsider perspective, if you look in and you say, right, this looks a bit strange, but you're like, no, I'm within this community. All the people I know and everyone I interact with hold these views. And so it's quite, although you're only exposed to a small amount of information, you think that's your world, and everyone else is probably not clued up on it. It's and I don't think it's overt. I don't think it's deliberate. I don't think there's someone at the helm, trying to force you to do that. I think it just naturally occurs. What do you think? Go on.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpick here, right? Like, let me preface with, I think that God and religion are two different things.
Yep.
And we can determine, I use the word God very, very loosely.
Yeah,
because the definition of what that is, we could be here for another fucking 3 hours.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is I don't have a definition. But let's use the word God / belief, right? Let's do that. I feel through my own experiences that religion is a mechanism of control, and is, whether you determine to be control positive or negative. Let me preface this again with one other thing. Words don't have feelings, and there is no such thing as a positive or a negative word. There is positive or negative context, and there is positive or negative intent, but the words themselves do not carry such emotional definitions. So when I say religion is a determination of, or a means of control, a vehicle for control, I'm not saying that positively. I'm not saying that negatively.
I get you.
I'm saying that as it is. I believe that religion can be controlling in a positive and a negative way. Right? As you say, Mormons are really nice people.
Yep.
If that is a characteristic of every single Mormon, there's probably something in the Mormon religion that makes you a fucking nice person, right? But anyway, so if we can start there. So I think that religion is something that controls. I think that Christianity is the one that I was brought up on, right? Like my mother wasn't religious, but I went to a Catholic school, so a lot of my teaching was Catholicism and Christianity and whatever. It feels to me like it's very, very obvious that the dissemination of information was controlled by Rome, by the Vatican, and by the leaders of the Christian Church in order to determine what is believed and what is not believed. That control is almost certainly replicated to every single facet of the religion. I feel like religion to me holds a negative place because I think it negates the idea of free thinking, whatever free thinking is. And it is high on shame and guilt and persecution, dependent on an extremely rigid set of variables and rules that are not pertaining to what I determine to be reality.
So that seems to me, the way you've kind of expressed that view, is that's not the first time you've said it either, right?
No, not the first time, no. And I had this argument with my RE teacher at 14.
Mate, where were you? You could have taught something there. And so so when I talk about overt control, I think it's within the context of the community you're in. So with me, within the church, you'd have like wards, and wards are like local areas. Then you'd have a stake, and a stake is like a city, and then it'd be broken into districts, etc. But definitely at the top end, there are certain mechanisms. When I talk to you about the correlation committee, there are reasons why they covered up certain things, and that's primarily my reason for leaving. So the big thing, we're taught about like these values as an example, no sex before marriage, etc. But when you have the leader of the church who had married 34 women, a 14-year-old girl, was drinking, smoking, pretty much doing everything. Like, and I said this to my family one day, I was like, if he were a member of the church today, he'd have been excommunicated. But, well, it's different. It's context, it's time. And like, no, we need to stop making excuses as well. And it's when you talk about that free thinking, oddly for me, when I did my first degree, I was still a Mormon. And so it really affected my ability to critically think. Even like when I was writing an essay, I'd already come at it with an inherent bias. But then now I've done 2 degrees and I've got a much more open mind. I can criticize things. I don't really have strong opinions on a lot of things. And so it definitely really impacted my ability. And I think another part of that was the job I had at the time, what kind of swayed me before I had my actual break is I was involved in data analysis.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ.
And it forced me to like go through quite logical processes.
Of course.
And I'm like, oh, hang on, this doesn't add up. And I think another thing that they teach you away from is it strongly bases appeals in favor of the religion based on logical fallacies. And I think a lot of people could learn a lot from understanding what logical fallacies are.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, the thing that sparked that argument for me was I was sat in this guy's class, right? And was I a bad kid in school? I don't think I was necessarily bad. Like I wasn't unnecessarily rude or outwardly I was a joker, that's for sure, but I was fat and had glasses. Like I had to have something to go for. Jesus Christ, like
you had to be that guy.
I had to be that guy, right? Like if I didn't have laughter, I had nothing. And yeah, so anyway, like, and this guy, I won't name him because there's no way that he's going to be found or whatever, but just for whatever, like I'm sat in his class and this is just after the half-term break, and we said to him, we were like, sir, like what did you do for the half-term break? And he's like, oh, well, I took my family and my children to the local abortion clinic and we walked around the walls 7 times.
Well, the walls of Jericho type thing.
Exactly. And
mate,
like all of us were like, what? Why 7 times? And he was like, it was a physical prayer to God to enact the walls of Jericho. And it was at this
pretty
point,
intense, man. That's pretty intense.
It was at this point at 13 or 14 that I was like, fuck this guy. I need to have a word, right? And I kind of like sat there and was like, what the fuck, bro? Like, what are you doing? And he then in his defense, like he then came out with arguments like he homeschools his children, and his wife and him will watch absolutely everything that his children will watch to ensure that there's no profanity, there's no blasphemy, there's no movement away from religion. And you know, this was the life that he'd lived, and this was his opinion, and this was his beliefs. Now, is that a good person to put in a school? Jesus, I don't know. Is that a good person to put in a class with people like me? I don't know. But there was people that said way worse shit than me. Like, I actually tried to have a conversation with this guy.
Yeah.
Other people like didn't, right? But what became unbelievably apparent to me is that you have a 40-year-old man ish, he was about that, a father of two, a husband, and he thought it was a good idea to go down to an abortion clinic and walk around it 7 times, and he actually expected it to fall down.
Yeah, wow. I mean, so, and potentially a catalyst for me stepping away was my wife was pregnant at the time, so I don't know if that was something that kind of women aren't particularly treated fantastically. I think it's just quite an old-fashioned mentality, you know. Stay at home, look after kids, and like she earns way more than me. Like I need her around, and then
please stay. Thank you.
Yeah, he can stay, and that was kind of one of the things that set me off. And I think looking back on it now, like I really can't wait for the day when I'm driving in my car. My daughter's like, "Oh, Mum and Dad, can you stop talking about church?" And I can't wait for her to not know. Like I can't wait for her to not have had those experiences, because that for me is a really powerful thing, and I'm kind of grateful for that experience.
Of course, and I think that, you know, for somebody that is not brought up in a religion, it is entirely simplistic for me to sit here and critique religion, right? But some of my closest friends are devout Muslims. I've got friends that were brought up in Christianity, and these are my closest friends, right? And you know, I absolutely respect their want to partake in those things. It's just not something that I do myself, right? We all sit in this flat on the sofas you see behind me, and we'll all share food, and we'll all have a laugh, and we'll all talk, and we can have deep, meaningful discussions. We just come from it from a different angle. But I feel like the decline in religious uptake in the modern world is telling.
Yeah. And so that's in my delve into the research, and this is where I do draw the line, right? Because I'm quite happy to sit there and to say, you know, we're all entitled to our own views and opinions, but I will draw the line at when those views and opinions are harmful to society in general.
Sure.
And so there is the church, particularly, has quite a strong sort of anti-gay rhetoric.
Yes.
And in every 6 months, when the church does its general conference where the leaders speak, teen suicides peak in their congregations. Jesus. And so that for me is like something where I'll say, you know, I have this thing where I'll stay out and like let people do the thing, but then there's also an important part to have, but it's also important to have those discussions objectively and like in a quite friendly and controlled manner, because views definitely do need to be challenged. And I think when you talked about the kind of the decline in religiosity of my generation, particularly in Mormonism, I think 40% of people who were raised in it retain. So I see that as a positive. But I think, you know, the internet has done a massive thing. You know, you think about when you were at school, when I was at school, I remember when I was 11 and got dial-up internet, and just listening to that tune, and we had textbooks, and textbooks were where we got our information from. But now that's different. It's not about the information we're presented with, it's how we evaluate the information we're presented with. And I think that's a bit of a shift, I guess, in thinking for sure.
Vastly. And I think as well, it's so the access to that evaluative information is so vast. For instance, if I wanted to argue with my teacher when I was 14, I could do that, but I could only really do that based off of my own opinion and the opinion of my other dumb as fuck 14-year-old friends, and my mother's beliefs, my grandmother's beliefs, my sister's beliefs.
Yeah.
But now, if I want to have a debate with somebody, like let's say you were like, oh, whatever, like, oh, Mormonism, right? I have a second screen next to me. I could Google Mormonism and be reading an article
and fact check me
and fact check you while we're talking.
Yeah.
Like, that ability is so incredibly powerful that the children of today, I think, are so less likely to be indoctrinated and to retain the sometimes oppressive idea of religion and religious practice.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is an important distinction of choice, right? I have a friend, and again, I'm not gonna name them, but was in a relationship with a female, and that female was not of the same religion as him, and in order for the relationship to progress, he had to convert to that religion, and of his own free will, he was willing to do that. Right now, in the end, that didn't happen, and the relationship broke down for its own reasons, and that's fine. But I think that the ability to choose based on a summation of information that you have available to you and that you've processed is important. And that's why I think that if I was to have a choice, I mean, and I'd like your opinion on this too, if just like the legal age for voting is 18, if the age limit for an introduction to a religion was 18, do you think that you would be a Mormon today? Or do you think that you would still be excommunicated, or whatever the term is when you leave on your own choice?
Hard to say. So I think no, I don't think I would be, because they're so fundamental to the way that you see the world. The way, the lens through which you look at the world is very different when you're raised in the faith, right? So it's kind of like Ricky Gervais said, isn't it? I'd rather just people start learning a religion at 21 than we introduce it to them. But so take as an example, a big thing when you grow up in the faith I was raised in is like the spirit. So the spirit was like, if you feel something good, if you like you've done something good and you feel good, that's the spirit, and that's God telling you that that's a good thing. And so when I left the faith, loads of people were like, well, you know, what about the spirit? And I'm like, I still feel it every day. It's just not the spirit. Like, it's human experience. And like, to me, now I know what I know. Like, I felt good when I watched The Lion King, but it wasn't the spirit. It's because I enjoyed watching The Lion King. And so, great film. And then still can't get my daughter to watch it because I don't want her to deal with the death of Mufasa. I don't think any child should be exposed to that at that age. But and so it's the lens at which you see the world, because there were some odd things when I kind of came out of the haze of Mormonism where I was like, okay, so this is what reality is like. And what I thought were exclusive feelings to me and were valid measurements of truth and objectivity were actually really subjective and actually quite experiential.
Yeah, I mean,
so it,
cool. No,
so in short, I don't think I would. If you introduced it to me at 18, I don't think I would.
I mean, the favorite example I have for this is the allegory of the cave, right? Okay. So Plato's allegory of the cave. You know this, right?
No, I don't know.
Okay, so you've spoken about quite a few philosophical theories, right? Mm-hmm. I am not in any way trained academically to be a philosopher. I did 1 year of A level, and I had so many arguments with my lecturer. I was told not to continue. These things happen. You know, the allegory of the cave is something that stuck with me though. So Plato's idea was that four men sat in a cave. They were all chained to a wall behind them. They were chained to their neck, they were chained to their arms, they were chained to their feet and their hips. So effectively, they couldn't move, really. They could turn their head to, let's say, a 15-degree angle either way, right? Mm-hmm. Now, let's not get into the specifics of how they were fed and watered and whatever. Forget that. This is philosophy. We don't care about those things. All that they could see was, in front of them, there were shapes moving across them. The same shapes over and over. And actually how that was happening was there was a fire behind them to keep them warm. And there was a cylindrical stencil, I guess, with various different shapes in it, and it was turning in a circle. So it was painting images across them, whether they be animals or whatever it is. Doesn't matter what they are, right? But for the first X amount of years of their life, they were able to communicate with each other via the understanding of these shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was their life, right?
Mm-hmm.
One day, a gentleman managed to free himself from his chains, and for the first time ever managed to turn around. And what he noticed to the right-hand side of him in the upper corner was a hole. Now, it was a hole that he felt big enough that he could crawl through. Bearing in mind, he didn't know how to crawl, but he willed himself through excessive muscle atrophy that he really should have seen Tom Walker about. But through excessive muscle atrophy, he managed to reach the mouth of the hole. Right? Now, that was extremely arduous, and that man was bruised and battered and whatever. But he reaches the mouth of the hole.
Mm-hmm.
And when he reaches the mouth of the hole, he sees the world that we know, cities and rivers and forests and lakes and ponds and birds and animals. And he's completely and utterly flabbergasted that what he's been brought up and born into wasn't reality, and that this new thing in front of him was reality. So he goes to walk back down, and he falls, trips, and eventually rolls down to the bottom of the cave. And he speaks to his friends, and he's like, oh my God, you have no idea what's happening. You have no idea. They beat him to death. Now, Plato's summation of this is that gentleman took the journey of what it is to be a philosopher. The rest of the world are merely blind, and they're staring at images in front of them.
Yeah.
He was the first philosopher, and he dared to break out of that mold and to see truly what is reality.
Mm.
And as he came back to society to tell them, he was damned and eventually killed for his thoughts.
Yeah.
Now, if we extrapolate out that to the determination of religion, you could argue that 3 of those 4 men are all indoctrinated into an entirely different religion. But in some way, you could still argue that they're chained to a certain set of images, a certain set of texts, a certain set of beliefs. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't necessarily agree that Donnie that decided to run up in the cave and have a look outside at the forest is looking at reality, because I don't really feel like we have an understanding of what reality is. But what I do think is that there should be an ability to not be chained.
Agreed. And I think that's where you've got to kind of take. That's an ace, by the way. I've never heard that before, and I think that's quite a good description. It's probably some of my experiences in the community, especially. But that metaphor in of itself is quite an interesting one, because one thing, when you look and you step out into the world, it's, when you mentioned it's about being overwhelmed, and I'd not heard it before, and there's part of me that's thinking maybe he just wants to go back into the cave. And that's also another interesting point, because when I left, I decided to post a status on Facebook about me leave, as they do, like, okay guys, message me, hun. But I wrote it very carefully as to not kind of trigger people's backfire effects, as to not say, no, it's the enemy, because it's easy to do that. And I probably received 40 plus messages from friends in the community who really don't believe, but feel like they need to be there because it's a good place to be, and largely it's a safe place to be. It's good to be in the cave. It's safe in the cave. The cave is all I know.
This is the undertone of what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
The undertone of what he's saying is essentially what you've just said, that whilst this idea that the cave is restrictive and it's chaining and it's barren and there's no food or water or whatever, like, the cave is also warm and dry, and you have friends there, and you feel like you have knowledge there, and you have habit, and you have pattern, you have routine. And these are all things that are absolutely necessary for human function, but it doesn't mean that it's a good thing.
And yeah, and that's the thing, is they're providing you with enough, but they also don't know what your potential is. And you know, having left, I've had experiences, man, as a human being that I never had as a member of the church, and I never thought I would have, that have been like life changing. You know, as silly as it is, and I know you mentioned that you've never drunk before, and ultimately that's totally cool, like, because it's your decision and one that you've reasoned right on your own processes, and you've decided this is one for me. And I was out on a night out with friends, and like it's the first night out I've ever gone out drinking, because I usually avoid it. And I was always told that those situations lead to the spirit leaving, or you make bad decisions. But I remember being like probably pretty drunk for the first time in my life, and just looking around at my friends and thinking, this is awesome. Like, I've never experienced it. I never thought I'd experience this, and I am, and it's awesome. And that's the thing, is, but you've got to be willing to. I went through some hard times, you know, and I talked to you about taking some medication and really struggling with some things, but that was a hard fought battle. But to come out of it on the other side and have those experiences are absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk about why I don't drink. Essentially, why I don't drink is after my mother kicked my father out of my house, she turned to alcohol. Was an alcoholic for 10 years, maybe, something like that. But it just so happened that those 10 years were some of the formative years of my life. And I saw enough in those evenings of drink, and I saw enough in those sober mornings, that I was like, I just don't fucking want to do this shit. Like,
yeah, get that.
like, I just don't. Like, there's enough that I've seen, and there's enough that she has said or done, or, you know, there's enough damage that has been wrought either by her or by the alcohol itself, that just makes me feel like it's not necessary for me to have that. And you know, people can argue that, and I actually hold these sentiments, that, you know, there is probably nothing better than when you go to like a Michelin star restaurant or whatever, and they serve you accompanying alcohol with the meal. That's essentially part of the flavor palette that you're having. I'm not going to fucking drink it, but I see that it's part of the artistry, it's part of the experience, it's part of everything. I get that. I entirely get that. As I said, I'm not going to fucking drink it, but I get that. And equally, I get, as you say, I am sure that it's a monumentally great experience if you're with a good group of people, and you go out and you get fucking leathered. And you know, I'm sure that kebab at the end of the night tastes absolutely phenomenal, right?
It does.
And you get home and your bed is like nothing you've ever felt before.
I disagree with that last part, because all I remember was just spinning. I just remember the horizon spinning. Right. So, yeah, but I totally get your point. Yeah.
But it's just something that it's probably, there's probably something that's very deep rooted in me that's tied to the notion of alcohol, and that's why I won't do it. I'm almost certain. But it's something that me as a person, I'm just not going to approach. The alcohol, that is, I'll get to the deep rooted issues eventually, but
that's the interesting thing, though, because ultimately it's your decision.
Yes.
And you've reasoned that in your own experiences, and you've developed a strong moral foundation for those reasons why you don't want to do it. And I think what I realized about some of the views that I held when I was a missionary, I found my journal, and I read through. I only had the strength a few months ago to read the journals that I'd written as a missionary.
Jesus.
And when I read them, I kind of just wanted to hug myself at 20 years old, because I remember like doubling down. I'd see statements like, when you get trained for 18 days, we get into this like intensive training center. And I remember writing at the end of the day, I really miss my family and I really miss my friends, but I just need to work harder, or I need to cut them out. I need to cut the like, because you can just see you doubling down. But there was one experience that I had where I realized my views weren't my own. Is I was quite like homophobic. It's not because it's a view I had. I just outsourced my morality. And I bumped into this guy in the street, and he's like, what's your view on homosexuality? And I was like, well, just like, came out of my mouth, love the sinner, hate the sin. And when I said that, I could see how much that hurt him. And I could feel in myself that what I said doesn't correlate with how I feel and what my views are. And that was kind of a little moment. And I saw in my journal when I'd written that, and it was like, oh, he's just angry because he knows that God doesn't agree. And I'm like, you could just see me like trying to push it out of my head. So I think it's about having that strong sort of moral foundation and reasoning to direct.
I mean, look, there's the problem is that I'm not sure that any of our thoughts are actually our own, right? But I think that there's an abstraction layer, right? And that abstraction layer, if you and it's such a beautiful phrasing, like if you outsource your thinking or if you outsource your morality, then it takes away some of the essence of what it is to be human. And we can have a Sam Harris argument about whether we have free will or not. If you want, that's fine. We can argue about predeterminism and all that sort of stuff. That's fine. I'm happy to have that discussion. But I think that for the basis of this, what's very difficult is the different experiences you have when you don't outsource your morality, or you don't outsource your thinking or your knowledge or your reasoning. The outcomes that you come to, or the conclusions that you reach, a lot of the time are very different to when you have those controlled by a central figure. Let me give it an example that's not religion. Football, right?
Yeah.
If you're a Manchester United fan, Liverpool are scum.
Yeah, they are.
Right? City, scum.
Yeah.
City, no fans. Liverpool, scum. Right? But if you actually went to Liverpool, right, and you talk to someone, I'm sure you'd find some absolutely grand people. I know I have. And the other amazing thing about this incredible outsourcing or insourcing is Liverpool, scum. City, scum. Put an England shirt on, lads.
Yeah. Tribalism.
Of course. And tribalism comes, and this is kind of my point about that it's very difficult to have your actual own thought, because whether you get your information from YouTube or Reddit or this academic study or that academic study, there is some form of tribalism and there is some form of bias in everything. Now, it may be that it's more extreme in something like Mormonism, something like Christianity, something like Islam, something like Buddhism, you name it, whatever. It may well be more extreme. But look, the idea, if you talk to Richard Dawkins or Ricky Gervais about atheism, they're pretty extreme about atheism, right? So the difficulty is that the extremity at which you hold a view generally determines or doesn't determine your ability to think clearly and with clarity. And that, I think, is something. And I know that my original point here was that, if you take religion away of that, if you take that religious abstraction layer, then you have an ability to come to different conclusions. But I'm kind of critiquing myself.
No, I think that when you're revisiting those points, have you come across the backfire effect before?
No.
So the backfire effect is kind of a bit of a psychological phenomenon, but it kind of relates to what we're discussing. Essentially what it is where if you have a deeply held view and I challenge that view, your amygdala in your brain essentially creates a fight or flight response, wherein following that discussion, you actually entrench people's views even further, because what they've seen is as a threat, and they said, I fought off this threat, I need to defend against this threat even further. And so there's a really nice cartoon someone did kind of walking you through the process. And that was another thing that kind of helped me think my way out a little bit. But that backfire effect it's about kind of some of the evidence, and we can talk about that at some point, but it's about getting people on the same side as you, right? And understanding your perspective and you understanding theirs.
Yeah, that backfire effect is definitely real. And it's definitely real in all facets of conversation. And, that's why I think it's also really important for me to be extremely careful about how I say things and why I say things, especially with something as touchy as this, right? Like religion is something that as you've already really expressly touched on, was the foundation of your life for 25 years, right?
Yeah.
25, 26 years. So it's very difficult to have a discussion with somebody about the foundation of their entire existence for a quarter of their expected lifetime.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to what we're discussing, is it's about empathy though. And kind of to to reel it all around into my kind of physio world, is one question that is really important to me as a therapist is if someone comes in with a problem, like pain is really complex. I can't go on about it enough as it's not simple as I hurt something, joint aches, it's because of this. There's a lot of psychological reasons, and sometimes the psychology of your perceptions of your pain can make the pain much worse, and it's about addressing those issues. But one question I always ask people is when I've done kind of a subjective assessment, it's like, well, what do you think it is? And that question to me is probably the most important question, because I suddenly get an insight into their view of what their problem is. And then we can inject some reality, which is a loosely used term, and then some kind of education to come around some of those barriers rather than just overtly forcing my views on what I think it is.
Absolutely. And I think what I want to add, because I've just realized that I haven't added it, is I said at the very start of this that my views on God or belief or faith or whatever is different to my views on religion. And I think it's important to kind of explain that. I don't necessarily see myself as an atheist, because atheist is a branding, atheist is a tribe, atheist is a team. In the same vein, I'm not sure I necessarily hold myself to be religious necessarily. I mean, look, I've been to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and you walk into there and you're like, okay, there is something different here. Like, there is something different here. I've been to the cathedral in Barcelona, and you're like, yeah, this is a similar feeling.
Yeah.
It's fucking weird. Like, it's not the same as what it's like outside. So, you know, like, whatever. But my determination is that I feel like there is something. Now, something could be a shared experience in the soil that we step on. Something could be the remnants of the energy still traveling around the solar system by the Big Bang. Something could be a divine creator named whatever. Something could be a logical fallacy that humans have created in which to give themselves purpose and meaning. Or something could be fucking aliens. I don't know. But what seems conducive to me is that we are in a situation that we are essentially creating what it is, and we are defining what it is, but on our own terms, right? And let me explain that a little bit. And my friend Sen is going to lambast me if he listens to this. He is both a mathematician and an economist, and he's going to fucking hate this because he doesn't. Yeah, anyway, like maths, English, science, whatever. To me, and religion follows the same suit. They're all dictionaries. They're all an attempt at which to explain something. They're all an attempt to define something. They're all an attempt at the very base of it to explain the reason for us being here in some facet or function.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem that you have with dictionaries is that they're never the one source of truth. We always add words to the dictionary. We always change words because language is evolving and language is changing. So by the very nature that they're all man-made, essentially, at least the writing of the dictionary of science, the writing of the dictionary of maths is something that man has penned, in the same vein that the King James's Bible, if anyone's watched iRobot, the Book of Eli, if anyone's watched the Book of Eli, then they will know that the King James Bible was written by hand. Mm-hmm. These are man-made creations to try to explain something that isn't man-made. And these are merely, we are essentially defining things like, I don't know, the biological system that we observe. Well, an observation is a definition. because it's a well experienced and somewhat continuous hypothesis. The best person that explained this to me was Faraz Sahabi, right?
Mm-hmm.
So me and Faraz Sahabi and a couple of other guys are sat in Trinity Kitchen in Leeds, right? And he says that he doesn't believe in the idea of truth, really. He doesn't believe in the notion of truth, because to get to a truth, you need something that's empirically unprovable. And there is no such thing other than death.
Okay.
The definitions that which we set out to use to explain, the language that we use to explain, is not empirical. If I say something, if I use a word, that word can have a different definition or a different context to you.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's why earlier I prefaced that words don't have emotions, because, you know, everything that I say because it means something to me, but that meaning could be slightly 0.5% different to you.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was like, okay, how can you prove that the scientific delivery of gravity is real? How can you prove that there aren't invisible pixies holding things down? And you're like, well, you know, the great science, and obviously he's being antagonistic on purpose.
Yeah.
But
a bit hyperbolic, yeah.
You know, he's like, the great scientists will tell me, well, this is the maths and this is how it works. And he's like, but what about if he doesn't? What about if there are great pixies pulling the earth down or pulling us to the earth? When we jump, they push us back down. That's difficult to argue against. If he can determine a theory or a definition that can match the theory or definition of gravity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in my human form, in my human condition, there have been points in my life that I have felt something greater than myself and greater than something that I have the notions to define. I don't know whether that's a white dude on a cloud with a massive beard. Couldn't tell you. I don't know whether that's an energy or an alien in the DMT realm. I don't know whether that's anything, frankly.
Yeah.
But if I'm pushed, then that's the summation that I have. And that's the difference that I make between religion as an organized hierarchy and God, quote unquote, as something else.
So I was laughing at the start because I realised that when you're talking about maths as a dictionary, my wife would have also had a few things to say on that.
I bet she would. I fucking bet she would.
So that's an interesting kind of point that you've made. I think we've got to be careful when we use the term God, particularly when we're in the society we are, because we're largely being raised in a generally Christian society.
Yep,
when we say 100%. God, we think of, like you said, white man with a beard sat on a cloud. But you know, a lot of us kind of, even as within my religion, we all kind of transposed our version of God onto our reality. You know, my God was probably a bit less forgiving and a bit more like dogmatic, get after it, whereas my wife's was probably more fatherly, kind of using a dad as an archetype. And so it's experiential, it's just our experiences generally that are kind of formulate that canvas by which we paint God. And we also got to be careful, and I think you alluded to the point of creating God as a power and an entity. It's sometimes, you know, have you ever seen the documentary on Netflix about the Rajneeshpuram's Wild Wild Country?
No, I've heard it's amazing though.
It is amazing, but the guy who was leading the Rajneeshis, he did a quote, and I saw it the other day on the internet. It was like saying, the atheist is this, the theist is this, and he's like, God is your experiences, and that can be his spin on it too. So to try and claim like an objective reality about God, are you wasting your time? Mm-hmm. And I think it's the lens by which you view things. I think for us, Sahabi's point's quite interesting. I probably wouldn't agree with him in his entirety, being that I think there's probably a few issues with burden of proof somewhere in there, because a lot of us, so the position I take on it is there isn't enough. Let's say there is a God, let's just assume that there is a God in whatever form that comes, then how do we know is it male? Is it female? Is it an entity? Is it an energy?
Is male
Then
and female even something that God defines himself by?
exactly. And so going through the realms of that, and I think where I draw the line is, why does he care what I eat? Why does he care what I wear, who I interact with? Because I would need quite a lot of evidence and experience to make decisions in my life to know that that's coming from that power. So the position I probably take is going to sound like a cliche, but like an agnostic atheist, being that I've not got enough information to make a decision. If the information comes along, great. But until then, I'm not going to say there's none. I'm not going to say there is one. I'm not going to say there isn't one. I'm just going to kind of be a cop out and sit on the fence. And, if there is information, great. But there's nothing that is powerful enough to make me change my life in such a way to abide by a certain code. And that's where it gets distorted by religion, as you talked about. It muddies the water.
I think that his point and my point, my counter question will be, how do you know there's enough information to make a decision on anything?
And so this is when we come back to kind of our
burden of proof.
Our core philosophies as well, because what information is enough information to act is probably the question, right? And so, like, I'll take an example. I know that if I don't eat, I get hungry. And when I get hungry, I get really grumpy. And then if I continue to not eat, I'm pretty sure, I'm not certain because I've not experienced it, but I'm pretty sure I might die if I don't eat. And so I make the decision that actually by eating, I feel good, I'm not grumpy, and I get energy. So I'm going to continue to do that process. And so I think something along those lines of where it's almost instinctual, and someone could argue that prayer is instinctual. But I think it comes down to the point is how is it directing me on a day-to-day basis? And is it something that I need to integrate in my life in order to function effectively?
And I think this is where we get into a different thing, right? And that different thing is one of the things you've just touched on is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
And I think that where it gets squirrely is when you come up from the very bottom layer of Maslow's hierarchy.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Is like, your needs, because what you said there is my needs to integrate in order to live a happy life, functional life, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all the evidence pertains to that actually what you need to live a functional life, functional being an extremely emotionless word, is some food, some water, and some shelter. None of that is a philosophical position, right? The gaining of water and food and shelter, although that we may then attribute the gaining of those things to a deity higher than us or a power higher than us, doesn't have to be, right? And after those things, you're then getting into a position of I know that I don't want to ring around the point of burden of proof, but we're getting into things that aren't necessity, but are merely layers of priority.
Yeah.
And I think that those layers of priority are debatable in every way, shape, or form.
For different people as well.
Exactly. And I think that one of the greatest theories I've heard, and one of the ones that I entertain the most, and maybe it's a bit wacky, is that we are, and I'm going to ask you a question after, and it's slightly off topic, but it should make sense, is that there is a very high potential that we're just dumb terminals.
Okay.
And when you put dumb terminals together, special things happen, right? If you put dumb terminals with basic algorithms together, have you heard of the two language bots of Facebook?
No. So is this the one with the AI?
Exactly.
Yeah, go on. So, remind me.
So Facebook decided that they wanted to see how quickly AI could communicate, right? So they programmed two AI machines. Now, the way that AI works is that you have a master and a slave, a learner and a teacher, essentially, right? So the learner knew nothing, whatever. The program was blank. The teacher had to teach the learner how to speak a very short sentence. Let's just say, I want a ball, but it wasn't English. It was just language. It was just numbers and whatever. Right? Fine. What happened when they ran the program is that extremely quickly, the learner and the teacher passed the point of learning communication and developed their own language because it was more efficient.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what happened afterwards is beautiful. Instead of allowing that to learn, the devs got fucking scared and just pulled the plug on the whole thing, right? Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Like, absolutely wonderful. But they're like, shit, turn that off. And you know, I'm an IT professional, right? So sometimes when I run code and I'm like, oh fuck, let me just turn that off. Like, yeah, these things happen. But you know, what we see is, and I don't mean this to downplay any human achievement or human improvement or whatever, is that to relate all the way back to the point that we had earlier, when you put vast amount of resources together to solve one problem, that's entirely similar to when you close all of the programs on your desktop and you just open one. You have dedicated CPU power in order to attend to one thing. That one thing could be a podcast. It could be internet browsing. It could be when you're experiencing lag on your PlayStation and you're like, you tell your missus to stop fucking streaming things on YouTube because you want to play Xbox, right?
Yeah.
Fine. But a CPU, by its very nature, deals with the threads that it's sent and merely processes the input of a packet and outputs whatever the algorithm has told it to output, right? I think that there is a case, or there is a theory. I mean, there's a theory that we're in the Matrix, right? And we're all just fucking illusionary.
Back to solipsism.
It holds a lot of weight, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that there's dumb terminals that if, like a computer, you feed it with power, ventilation, and some input and output, aka food, water, shelter, that crazy things can happen, right? Now, of course, the answer to what you're going to say is that a computer needs an input and output mechanism like a keyboard or a mouse or something driving it. Fine. And that can be your answer for a higher power, maybe. But there is, I certainly entertain that idea when I think, because, and this is the final thought I'll put before I let you speak, because I know I've dragged on, is like, as I say, I'm an IT professional and a lot of my brain works in what I determine to be my adaptation of logic. Right? I understand that if I press a number, something on a keyboard, I understand what happens in the computer in order for something to happen on my screen. I know that when I'm writing code, I am directly interacting with the kernel of the machine in order to execute certain processes. Well, when I then map that onto human psychology or behavioral psychology or biology or whatever, I'm like, oh, it's like, there's a lot of parallels here. There's a lot of parallels here.
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting we've gone down this route, because I like to go venture into these realms sometimes, and I think it's kind of, we don't necessarily hold a position on these things. I think going back to what we talked about a while ago is let's separate because you've got to remember, from my experiences, I'm still connecting the God and religion thing, right?
Of course.
That's still a big part of me. So let's throw the religion.
You still call
out.
it my religion, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Still not a member, but it's still part of my identity.
Absolutely.
And so, but then if you look at God, and then you whip away all of these, because there's still that part of my brain that says, if you present me with the God, I'll be like, because it's some attachment to it. But then if you strip that away, I'm like, I'm totally interested in attacking and coming at some of these viewpoints, because these conversations don't lead, I don't think they particularly lead to harm. I don't think they particularly lead to damage. Well, go and cry in the toilets after, but we'll address that. But I think when you can remove those biases, and when you can start focusing on what's the programmer, we can look at scientific explanations, but I really think like philosophical explanations are really important, or philosophical theories are really important. But it's the process of us understanding how we think, not just necessarily being given information. And you can apply that to anything we do. You can apply that to programming, I can apply that to physio, and it's about understanding that this being or science or this behavioral psychology, however we are being told to act in the world, we're pretty predictable as well, as much as we like to think we're not. I've actually, while I'm sat here on my bed, I'm looking at a book I read a while ago called Willful Blindness.
Okay.
Basically what it looks at is how our biases are essentially exposed in society, how like organizations can use it to boost productivity, the types of foods we eat. And I think there's a big part of acknowledging that we're not actually as unique as we think we are.
Oh, gotcha.
And we like to think, oh, I'd make this decision, but actually, if you put in the situation 100 times, you'll probably do it 100 times because of your
Jordan
experiences.
Peterson makes a really interesting, and let's not, Jordan Peterson has his views, and then he has his other views, right? Like, fine.
Did you ever though, the one, and this is kind of tied into where I was going with it, is do you ever read the book that, I can't remember the one about the final solution in Poland he recommended? Have you read that? A Few Good Men, I think.
I've not read it, but I've done the same study that you have, I think.
So I've read that book, and to see the interaction that Joseph Goebbels had with the soldiers, after they'd committed these atrocities, he'd sent deliberate orders that the men weren't allowed to sit in their rooms and be quiet, that they need to celebrate, that they need to go have drinks, that they need to meet with their friends, so they didn't have time to reflect. And so they got them hammered, they drifted off, and then they didn't have opportunities to reflect on these atrocities.
Yeah.
And if you can change 45, 50-year-old men from police officers to mass murderers, it could happen to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the couple of books that I was going to reference was one was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
I've not read it.
Oh my Jesus Christ!
Have you read it?
Oh yeah. So
I'll have to put it on my list.
A basic synopsis is this: Viktor Frankl was a Jewish man, got taken to Auschwitz, managed to survive. He had a medical background, so he was taken in by Victor Mengele, and he was basically made to do autopsies on the patients that Mengele had experimented in inverted commas, right?
Yeah.
And half of the book is him explaining his experience in a very medical, precise way. There wasn't a lot of emotion in it, and he explains why there wasn't a lot of emotion in it. And his explanation is, I can't bring myself to allow myself to feel those emotions.
Yeah.
And the other half is he then went into psychology, and he developed a method of psychology that is all based around the notion of purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he used Nietzsche's famous quote of, if man has a why, then he can overcome almost any how, right?
Yeah.
And I know I've butchered that quote. It's not perfect Nietzsche, but
I get you.
Yeah, it's something like that. Sorry, Nietzsche. Sorry. But that book shows how men turn one way or the other, right? And he uses the notion of purpose to show how those men turn from either what we determine to be a police officer, a good man, to somebody that's stripping Jews and gassing them and killing millions of people.
Yeah.
Right? And the other book I was going to reference was a book called The Tattooer of Auschwitz. Again,
I've heard about this as well. I've not read it.
Again, so it's okay. Like, it's okay. It's a little bit more like it's half novel, half memoir. And obviously it's based on history. The lady went and met this guy and delved his thoughts and whatever. But it's essentially a love story. But this guy came from an affluent background in Austria, got taken to the camps, and for some reason was made tattooer of Auschwitz. And he talks about his interactions with the guards, and it talks about how, the most pivotal part of the book for me was when they played a football game. So on Christmas, they played a football game at Auschwitz, the prisoners versus the guards. And it turned out there was a couple of semi-pros in the prisoners team. And they were winning like 3-1 or 2-1 at half time. And they could see that the guards were like, we're going to kill these guys. And the captain was the tattoo of Auschwitz, and he was like, lads, you know, we need to lose this, right?
Just let a few in.
Like, we need to lose this. And, you know, just that, the dichotomy of how that happened, and showing these guards, showing these men as real people with real emotions. And yet over all of that layer, there is this training, right? This utter, I'm struggling to think of the word, like this brainwashing, essentially, this rewriting of code to make them something completely different.
Did you ever have you ever looked into the Stanford prison experiment?
Yes, that was one of my favorite things about power, and I used the Stanford prison experiment to explain Abu Ghraib to people.
Right. And so that for me was probably one of the moments where I'm like, oh crap, you give someone a number, and you give a shift of power, you give responsibility, you give an us and them, and then suddenly, bang, they have to stop the experiment. And I can't imagine what must have been like. I can't imagine the lecturers, I can't imagine the professors sitting there going, whoa, like just how quickly it escalated.
Days.
Madness, absolute madness. And so it's things like that when we go back to hard views, beliefs, etc. And this is kind of when we go back to the beginning, is you need to be oh so careful when you think about challenging people's views, and you've got to see people, you know, all of this things that's gone on with the Black Lives Matter movements and all of that. I'm really quite tired of seeing people dehumanized and people mocked. People, like, it's really important to have discussions. And I think as someone who's grown up in the UK, I always kind of looked at the United States as being like, I'd look at an election, think it's quite polarizing, you know, there'd always be slinging mud. But actually it's definitely creeping in. It's definitely creeping in on more so on this side. Maybe I was just naive when I was younger as well. It's probably always the case.
I think it is always the case. I think it's just the way that America is. America is more of an exaggerated show. The UK is way more subtle, but just as brutal, just as much of a show.
I can agree with that. And I think it's those kind of polarizing views that I really, in my life, I think the one thing I've learned having my experiences in, like, even in elite sport, it's quite an aggressive environment to be in. It's a bit of a dog-eat-dog world. Even with your own teammates who are your friends, it's quite confusing. And the approach that I've kind of taken now is to try and be as, I think it's important to challenge, but I also think it's important to understand. And I think that's probably what makes me quite good at my job, is understanding other people's views and perceptions. It's like, it's massive to be able to understand, like, we talk about experiences, right? Your experiences of God, my experiences of God are very different, right? And we see the way that we look at the world is very different based on those experiences we've had growing up. And so when someone comes into me and says, oh, my posture is bad and I've got a poorly neck and the doctor says it's wear and tear, in my head, I'm like, posture isn't really that much. Wear and tear probably happens to all of us. It's not something to worry about that much. And your neck hurts, but we can get it strong. I've got these views, they've got their views, and I'm like, yeah, all the evidence that posture doesn't cause pain is bullshit. Don't worry about it. That's not addressing their concerns. That's not helping them understand. And then I just turn them to be like, oh, the physio didn't listen to me. He didn't understand how severe my problem was. And so it comes back to just being subtle, being understanding, and applying these sort of views of epistemology, of these views of how you see the world, and understanding the lens by which you look through it. Because we've all got pretty muddy lenses as well. Definitely, yeah.
I mean, I'm looking through them right now. You can see my eyes are fucked, mate. I can't see a thing.
I was going to say, I saw a picture of you at a competition one time. I was like, I haven't got like young glasses on. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure I'd be able to see very well.
Mate, I tell you, when it comes to so the picture that you saw was probably the picture when I told the story of the weight cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus, that was tough. But yeah, like even then, I stepped on the mat and thankfully he shot a takedown, so I could go to front headlock. But otherwise, like, yeah, I mean, my eyesight's not that terrible. It's pretty bad, but it's not that terrible. Like, I had operations when I was a kid, so I'm kind of okay. But yeah, like, I think you're right that epistemology and just kind of the idea that it's instead of, and this is something that I have to think about all the time because I'm so guilty of this is obviously inside of ourselves we've rationalized what our opinion is, but when we're speaking our opinion to others, it's so important to say it in a way that is non-inflammatory as much as possible. And obviously then that determines, in a professional realm, I think that's easier because they're coming to you to say, please give me your opinion of this.
Yeah, definitely.
So then, already some of the social cues are taken care of for you. But in a personal perspective, that's very difficult because this person may not even want your opinion. They may just want you to listen, or they may just want you to hear them, or they may just want you to be a bystander or whatever, or they may want your opinion, but the opinion that you give isn't the one that they want, right? So how that we engage in those conversations, I think your notions of subtlety, your notions of empathy, your notions of what I determine to be positive, moral and ethical traits is so important.
So there is one experience kind of, I think that was interesting to me as a professional, but being exposed to from the viewpoint of another professional. So I had elbow pain for 3 years. Pretty bad. It was really quite bad. So it started when I was doing judo.
Or what your perception of bad is, right? Remember.
Absolutely right. And so and I escalated it psychologically, and I'll tell you why. I had this elbow pain. I couldn't bend my elbow past 90 degrees. I felt like, this is my perception, I felt like my nerve was going to snap. I was getting just chronic pain, couldn't sleep, all these things. And I went down the route of seeing certain physios, and then I eventually got referred to an orthopedic surgeon. And I went to see the orthopedic surgeon, and I looked at the x-ray. He's like, this is a question he asked me, he's like, does that look like a normal x-ray to you? And my question was like, well, yeah, it actually looks fine. It's like, no, it's all arthritic here. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Like, it doesn't look it to me. It's like, no. He's like, you will lose range of movement in the next 10 to 15 years. You'll need an elbow replacement. You will not be able to do the sports you can do anymore. I need you to stop training, and you're just going to have to look at modifying your career. And so I was relatively inexperienced at that time. And in my head, I'm thinking, crap, I'm going to have to change my career. I can't do JiuJitsu anymore. I can't do judo anymore. And the evidence for elbow replacement isn't great. And I'm going to be in pain all this time. And I walked out there and I got home and I'm just like, I sobbed, man. I'm like, is this it? Like, is this like breaks on my life? But then I asked to speak to another professional and request an MRI. And I went to see this other professional, who was his senior consultant. I said to him, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. He looked at the MRI, like, no, probably not. But in those 3 months, I built up quite a strong, like, my elbow got worse. And I was feeding into this narrative that I believed it was bone-on-bone arthritis, and it was the end of the world, and I'm not going to be able to grapple anymore, and I didn't. And I went back to the mats probably a week after I saw the second consultant, my pain just started getting better and better. And that was the difference. Is it's that approach, it's that understanding people's stories and what their desires and their intentions are, mate. And so careful. It can be a real minefield, and this is why I'm so passionate about it. Because if I tell someone your posture's bad or your back's bone on bone, and I've had patients cry because younger physios have said to them, "Oh, your bone's crumbling." I'm like, who says that to the human being?
My mum had that.
Did she?
Yeah, so my mom had 2 hip replacements, 2 knee replacements, and was, before she passed away, she was probably about 5 years out from a wheelchair. Now she definitely she was riddled with arthritis, right? Riddled with varicose veins. She was just not in a good way whatsoever. But, sorry, my missus has literally just turned up next to me. And I'm like, fuck, man. Jesus Christ. And so, yeah, so she was riddled with arthritis, but her arthritis started when she was like 25, 27. And she went to a doctor early on then, had an MRI, and they were like, oh yeah, like you're fucked. Like you're fucked. Like, you're not going to last. Like your hips aren't going to last and whatever. And she had a hip replacement relatively early. She had it like 47, I think, which is, you know, the doctor didn't want to put her in for another 20 years or whatever. And just the pain was so extreme that they operated on her earlier. And then 2 years later, she had the second one. And then 4 years later, she had knees. And, you know, like it was just, but you're right. Like the question of how much better could she have gotten with a different approach? Maybe she could have lasted another 10 years, 15 years, whatever. Like, I don't know.
But this is the thing, it's about educating on the issues and conditions that people face. So arthritis, for example. All right, I'll ask you, what's your perception of arthritis? What do you think it is?
Well, my only perception is what I've been told and what I've watched and what I've researched when my mother was diagnosed with it. But my understanding of arthritis is it's when the cartilage in between your joints wears down through whatever means. I don't really know what the means are, overuse or weight or inflammation or whatever. And you're left with, in most joints, a ball and socket with no cartilage. So no lubrication in the ball and joint, and essentially the bones are wearing away at each other, and that creates gaps. And then gaps obviously leads to massive pain, and then gaps can lead to instability within that joint. Therefore, they need to be replaced. What my emotional understanding is fucking severe pain, right?
Yeah. And so, you know, I think it's a pretty good summary, to be honest. Quite impressive.
Thank you.
And but you know, it's some of the terms that we use, because osteoarthritis is actually quite. You'll probably have some joints that are slightly arthritic. But
I mean, almost certainly.
But at the end of the day, you can largely do a lot of your strength training can mitigate some of the effects of it. The pain that's caused from arthritic pain isn't necessarily as a result of the bone on bone. It can be types of edema, it can be swelling within the joint. And so there's certain mechanisms you can do to manage that. Slight pedal of equipment we use at the clinic, but there's this new machine called electromagnetic transduction therapy, and we've just started to use. It's kind of one of the third machine we've got in the country where it can reduce that sort of bony edema. So we're looking at that as now as a treatment approach for arthritis. Hip replacements and knee replacements will take the pain away, but there are things we can do in that process. It's about getting people's level of function, because I bet if we go and see a mum and they're like, you're riddled with arthritis, right, you can't move, then it plays on this narrative that my activities have to be reduced or stopped. One example is I worked in pediatrics for the last year in the NHS, and so in pediatrics I work specifically in like neurodisability and muscular dystrophy, which are really nasty conditions. But I saw a little girl who's 12 years old, riddled, like hip arthritis was like pretty severe, to be fair. And the doctor's like, oh, we're going to do this surgery and this surgery. And she's like, well, I can just keep doing my best and I'll keep trying and I can do everything I want to do. So I don't think I need the surgery yet. And I'm like, yes, that is the type of, because although these interventions can be effective, and I think there's definitely a place for hip and knee replacements, it's about giving people autonomy and choice over what they need to do with their bodies and what they want to do. Because a lot of the times I think people feel that if they go and see a doctor or a senior consultant, that they take their advice as absolute gospel, when there are other professionals, even psychologists, psychiatrists, who can support them in that process too. People are really complex. We're not kind of machines that made of skin, are we? There's quite a lot. Maybe, you never know. It could be just units stuck in a warehouse next to each other.
I mean, like you've said, right? Like a lot of human behavior is patterned. It's habitual, right? You can map it out. And we agreed on that point earlier. And I think that the reason why we think humans are complex is because we don't understand. We haven't developed a dictionary yet.
Yeah.
And like for instance, and I will use. Sorry, I know you're about to say something. Like I'm going to use coronavirus as a thing.
Yep.
We understand more about coronavirus now than we did in March.
Yeah.
We understand because we've explored. Without the exploration, we don't have the understanding. Now, coronavirus is less of a scary thing because it's less unknown, right? There's lots of things I'm sure that we still don't know, right? But because there's so many articles that have come out about things like how it's passed around, how it's contracted, how to defend against it, and sure, half of these have now been thrown out the fucking window because they were wrong and they were an overestimation or an underestimation. But the notion of coronavirus and the notion of what it is to have it, even the base definition of what it is better understood now than it was in March.
Yeah, I agree.
The same can be said for physio. The same can be said for anything, really. As long as there are resources, as long as there is CPU power that is positioned to that app, to that window, to that problem, like yourself, you're going to make a change, a difference to the physiotherapy world. And the changes that you incorporate to your physiotherapy will undoubtedly change the face of physiotherapy. Whether that be a tiny pixel on the screen or whether that be the whole thing is essentially up to the time you're willing to put into it. Right?
Yeah, and I think that when you talk about like CPU power, it's quite a good metaphor. I like it, where it's about allocating those resources as well, and where we're allocating those resources effectively, because we only have so much resource, we only have so much time, right? So just in my life, for example, I'm not going to be a world champion at jiu-jitsu. I'm cool with that.
Maybe masters, who knows?
Yeah, sneak my way in, blue belt masters. And then another thing though is I invest quite a lot of time into focusing my time and efforts on my profession, right? So a bad example is if you look like a classic progression within let's say a public sector role in the NHS, you get paid more for how long you've been in the company, right? Does that equate to experience? Not really. Does time necessarily equate to experience? Not always, because I probably put last week I probably did nearly 60 hours of work, but the experience of gaining that 60 hours is not the same as someone else who's done 37, right? And the way I've reflected on those experiences and the way I've tried to better myself by listening to like webinars and different things when I've been driving back from work, the way I see it is my brain is like the clinical reasoning, and then I have all of these different inputs that is tools I can do into my clinical reasoning part. And the more tools I have, the kind of more nuanced and balanced and calculated I can be in my clinical reasoning. And so I agree with you. It's about dedicating those resources to getting a better understanding. And we talked about when we talked about God. If you think about God, if we dedicate time and processing power to exploring that concept and having discussions about that concept and developing that concept, we get places, right? And you talked about Plato and him being a bit of a pioneer of philosophy. We're still talking about him.
Yeah.
And, those conversations have obviously led to something. So, yeah, I agree with you on the coronavirus. It's funny you mentioned it about like a base level understanding. As far as I'm concerned, like we know like this much.
Sure. But it's more than this much.
Exactly. It's more than this. And surprising though, actually, if you'd be surprised how many epidemiologists have developed over the last few Google searches. But I agree with you. I think it's how we dedicate our time and our resources. And, I mentioned a few things about like training, for example, and training as a resource, right? Because you've only got so much time to get good at something.
Yeah.
We've got the same amount of hours in the day. And so is my time best invested in strength training? Is my time best invested in visualization? Because I became pretty good at skeleton by just imagining going down the track. Like I probably spend an hour or so a day just imagining runs, and it made me pretty good at that. But, where do we allocate our resources and where do we spend? Because I see like time as a bit of a currency. Like we spend it in such a way that we want the best return for our investment. So I'm on a bit of a waffle, but I think the point I'm trying to make is when it comes to developing ourselves on a particular subject or area, we've also got to acknowledge that there is a limitation on our time and the resources that we have. And when we come back to epistemology and valuing kind of the people to go to, we need to look at, when we look at experts, right, and scientists, and we talked about evaluating evidence, it may be a faulty way of doing it, but a big thing for me is get to know the expert, see where their passions are, see where their biases are, see how they invest their time, and see how they invest their time and effort and rigor into producing good quality evidence and data. And so it's really interesting coming from the background I've come from, where it's like it almost rejected science as trying to be an absolute. But now, as someone who's quite the scientist, you'll find that I don't really like hold a very strong. It will inform my practice, but I don't really deal in absolutes. And kind of my question for you, really, because I asked myself this the other day: is there anything you would say you 100% have a believe to be true?
Yep.
Yeah. What's that?
The only thing that's true is death. And I know that sounds entirely morbid, but it's not. That's not how I mean it. Like
No.
One of the earliest conversations I had with my partner, and I'm extremely fortunate she stayed around for it, is like,
let's talk about death.
Essentially, right? Like she's somebody that comes from a traditional background. She's extremely caring, extremely loving, and she
You're
has
just saying that because she's next to you.
She's fucked off now. It's fine.
Okay, fine.
And like she has a view of what she determines love and marriage and children and family to be, right? And it's beautiful. It is beautiful. It's not the same one that I necessarily hold in all facets, but it's beautiful. And I was like, okay, cool, but like, what about if that doesn't happen? And then there's kind of a paused silence. It's like there's a potential that doesn't happen, right? There's a potential that for whatever reason you don't marry, or you can't have children of your own biology. You can adopt and you can do all these things, great.
Yeah.
But there's a potential that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And we then talked about constants, like the constants of life. I'm like, well, actually, there's not many constants in life, right? The constant that we believe to be is that we wake up and we breathe. Not true.
No.
Like you and I, unfortunately, could go to bed this evening and not wake up tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? That's a possibility. You're a healthy man. I'm a semi-healthy man. Like the possibility of us not waking up is relatively low. Relatively low. Still a possibility. Right? It's never an absolute zero or never an absolute one. And when we kind of got to it, I was like, the only constant that we have in this life is death. And it kind of came that she met me like relatively soon after my mother passed. So I was kind of in this weird flux state of like, everything's going to die, but it's true. Everything will die. Right. And that was the notion that I said, is that everything dies. Like everything must die. And whilst that sounds entirely morbid, that's entirely based on your perception and the context of what I've said, is that you can take two precedents. The first one is everything must die, so I must be a nihilist because nothing matters.
Yeah.
Or you can go the other way and you can say, oh my God, everything dies, so I must absolutely savor every single second. Now, both of those are extremes, so I don't really like either of them. I think that the choice that I take off that one belief of that one solid belief, is that whether you believe in determinism or free will or whatever, your experience is your own and you should experience it. And you should experience it how it's to be experienced. Now, I don't want to get necessarily, because I know that I've nearly had you for 2.5 hours. Like, I don't really want to get into the discussion of fate, because that's a difficult one for me. And I think that ties back into the faith and the belief thing. I'm not 100% sure that we entirely decide completely independently of that we are the sole source of what we do. I'm not sure that that's true at all, because I'm well aware of some of the characteristics and some of the mannerisms I have are directly correlated with my father and my mother. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I can hold the notion of entirely free will, and then we can get back into the Thomas Aquinas' first mover. But as I said, I didn't want to touch on that, so I'm kind of riveting. But the perception that I take off the one constant belief that I have is that is that time is a currency. Time is I determine time to be extremely precious. I have a tattoo on my wrist here that says time, words, and effort, right? And I believe that time, words, and effort are like, if you had a triptych of important pillars of life, then the time that you have and how you spend it, the words that you say and how you use them, and the effort that you put into the time and the words that you say, if you can master those three things, then you're in a pretty solid place for life, right? And that all trickles down to my belief of the own, like my only 100% belief is that everything will end, and that death is coming for everything eventually. Whether you determine death to be this eternal blackness where the light's shut off, the show's over, the curtain comes down, and that's it. Whether you determine it to be this forever afterlife, whether you determine it to be that you're just going to go to the soil and the maggots will eat you, that's kind of up to you.
So I think kind of I guess we're coming to a bit of a peak, aren't we? But one thing that I think is, this is my perception, how my view changed, is when I was a Mormon, I perceived that life would go on forever, that I would be with my family forever and work forever, right? Or doing I'll be busy and all those sorts of things. But that really frightened me. I didn't like that. I found weird. I wasn't comfortable with that concept. And when my kind of worldview came crashing down, I'm not one of these people who, I find it a bit trite when people live every day like it's your last, because I'm like,
YOLO,
no,
bro.
Because I'll have no money by day 2. But I really see my life now as that you talk about, and I really like that tattoo, is I have so much I want to get done, right? And the clock could run out tomorrow. And so it's about being in a measured manner. I think, like you mentioned, for me, it's about being effortful, doing my best, trying my hardest, and going to bed each day being yeah, I'm on something. I've got momentum, I'm building momentum. And if I did die, then that's great. It's been a great run. If I
Well, it's not great,
passed,
but
I've had a good run. If I look back on my life now, I've achieved great things. I'm married. I've got a beautiful family. I've got so many things I could be. If another person looked at my life, I think they'd be like, wow, what a nice, my 16-year-old self would look at my life I have now and think, I like that. That looks good to me. And so for me, when I think about death, and I don't think it's a morbid subject, it's a bit of a motivator for me as well.
Yeah, you can take it either way, I think.
But I kind of see every day as being quite precious, and sometimes, and I think this has probably guided my philosophy in life generally, is I'll have moments where, I don't know about you, but I'll step outside of myself. So if I see my daughter playing, or she's interacted with me, or I'm sat on the sofa, I'll step outside of myself and be like, if I could see at 15 years old, I could see what I've got now, I'd be so excited. I'd be so chuffed for this future. And so I think that's a large change in my philosophy, probably since becoming who I have become over the last 4 years, is I take little snapshots in my brain of this is awesome. And then in a year's time, it could be even more awesome. But if it did come to an end, it's still great. It's still positive.
So I haven't quite reached that level yet. Death is certainly a motivator for me, but I still sometimes lay awake in bed at night fearing death, and it's just because I feel like the potential that I have is yet to be fulfilled. I could look back, if I, again at 15, I'm sure if I looked at the life I have now, I'd be like, yeah, it's okay, but you could do more. And I think, those are the slight switches in perception that, sure, I'm relatively pleased with what happens now. When people ask me, especially during the lockdown, they're like, how's things? And they're expecting to me yeah, it's a bit shit. And I'm
okay? Yeah.
And I'm honestly, mate, I'm doing all right. I'm still working. I've got my partner with me 24/7. And for the most part, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a roof over our heads. We've got enough money to buy food. We've got enough money to, pay for a Netflix subscription. I've got enough money to keep a podcast running. Yeah. I've got enough money to do X, to support my gym. I've got enough money to do X, Y, and Z. There's actually fuck all to complain about. You know what I mean? But the term that I used, and one of the next tattoos that I'm going to get, is memento mori. So memento mori is always be mindful of death. And again, it's not like a keep looking over your shoulder because it's coming.
No, it's not. I get that.
It's a remember that the beauty in everything is that it doesn't last. And the thing that I thought was really powerful about what you just said was, take every day measured. And I think that if I was really, really pushed, and again, the words that I'm going to say will not be able to quite describe what I'm saying, but if I was pushed on what it is to be human, I'll use a quote from the film Lucy. You ever seen that film?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So when Lucy, Scarlett Johansson, is talking to Big Bad Morgan Freeman, my man Morgan Freeman, she says to him, like, I've acquired control of 100% of my cerebral capacity. What do I do? And he looks at her like she's a fucking idiot. And he's like, isn't it obvious? Pass it on. And I think that if there's one thing that I feel is abundantly apparent in my life, is that there's a shared experience somewhere. The myths, the legends, the stories, the religions, the anecdotes, the languages, these things have been passed down from generation to generation. The idea of humanity, biology itself, has been passed down from generation to generation. And if there is one notion of which I find myself attuned to, it's that this experience is in some way shared, and actually the primary notion that we have as humans is to just pass it on, acquire as much as we can in the limited time that we have, and just pass it on.
And I think it's on the pound coin, isn't it? Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Oh, fuck knows, but
on the edge of your pound coin, it says standing on the shoulders of giants.
It shows you how much I look at coins.
It's because you deal with notes. And
if only. Fucking hell.
But I agree with you, and I have these moments where probably some of them I just sit and think, and I'm like, how mad is it that as I live today, I am the byproduct of like tens of thousands of different reproductive cycles to be the person that I am today. Like, it's absolutely mad. And I don't think you can always hold that mentality. I don't think, you can always forever be grateful. I think it's quite trite to say that.
It's incredibly difficult.
But I think in those moments, I can look back and be like, this is like, what a ride. Like, how cool is this that I get to be in this world, get to interact with different people who think and feel differently to me. It's madness. So that's been my big thing in the last 4 years is I came out of a world where now I'm like, we're in it together, whereas I felt like it's more of an us and them, and it sounds corny, but I looked at my neighbours not as an opportunity to teach them about what I know, but to understand their experiences of what makes them who they are, and not to try and change or edit those experiences. It's definitely helped me become a little bit less judgmental. Not that I was a judgmental person, but just to be able to understand other people's experiences.
The framework in which you were determining the world was judgmental. It's not that you were judgmental yourself.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
And I think that's probably a beautiful way to end this.
I think so, mate. I think we've chatted for a while.
I think that the first thing I will say, though, is and again, I don't mean any disrespect to the Mormonism, but it's more, I think that you should be vastly, vastly proud of yourself. And that's that it's very, very difficult to change your belief system. And it's extremely difficult for you to change behaviors as an adult for something of which you were brought into for serious formative years of your life. And to have done that, and to have done it, obviously it was extremely effortful, and you're still wearing the scars of some of those experiences, but to come out of it with passion, with empathy, with a family, and with a well-functioning, what I determine to be logical brain,
let's talk to my wife,
is something that is absolutely fucking phenomenal, and I congratulate you on, and I think that you should be extremely proud of yourself for.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. Just really appreciate having me on. I didn't expect us to go down the philosophy route as hard as we did, but I'm glad we did. I think just kind of my final point really is, I can't emphasize or stress the value of trying to understand, like, from my previous experiences, and to anyone else who's listening, and from my previous experiences, I never really focused on why people think that way. I just understood that's what people think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's real value and real beauty in understanding how humans operate, think, and hold values when we understand why they think those things. I feel like it's a process by which we can connect better with people rather than just pointing fingers and blaming, really. It's quite an interesting journey for sure. I'll stop waffling there and I'll let you get some sleep as well.
All right, my friend. Look, I mean, I thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and
You too,
please
mate.
let's do this again.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, mate. I'll catch you soon.
Yeah, cheers, bud.